Set. We'll just get started. So it's 7:30, so I think we're all set. Members of the press. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Fairfield Board of Finance budget cycle. Tonight is the first of many, many meetings over the next 3 weeks. You're welcome to attend all of them if you would like. We're going to start this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance and then the presentation by the first selectman on his budget recommendation for this year that's already gone through the Board of Selectmen as we changed up the process this year to follow more of the charter. I would like to point out that the first selectman is suffering from a cold this evening, so A, we thank him for being here, and B, that means he'll be shorter than usual. So everybody please rise, and we'll ask Mr. Tetro to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. This evening, we've got a variety of departments. We're going to hear the presentation. We're going to go to the not-for-profit section of our meeting. I'm standing because I'm going to be moving momentarily. Then we're going to go through administrative and general departments, and then the board of, or rather the finance departments for the town. So that's where we stand. It's a relatively lengthy agenda in terms of number of departments, but usually not a whole lot of controversy. So with that, I'm going to step out of the way. I think Mr. Brown will step out of the way as well, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Tetro. Mr. Tetro, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to try and adjust this screen. If I can't get this working quite right, we'll just use the PowerPoint handouts, but let me see if I can get this working properly. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I don't seem to be able to get this PowerPoint working properly, so we're going to... Oh, there we are. All right. Eventually, there we are. All right, that's enough's enough. So sorry for asking you to move. You can move back to your chairs. We're going to avoid the technology here. There is should be a handout at your desk, yes.
Mike, is it your did you give us a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, there should be a handout there. If not,
Hey, how's it going? Hello, Sheila. You help me by handing these out.
Okay.
oh, it's over there.
Oh.
That's not what we're handing out.
Thanks you.
Again, thank you. As soon as you get those, we'll step through that.
So I guess we can cut the technology budget, huh?
Since it's the Board of Ed,
Yeah,
certainly.
where's the IT director?
No, just
Thank you.
Board of Ed IT wasn't able to be here tonight. This was all set up. I had instructions, but
Can I just make sure, before Mr. Tetro, before you start, do we have copies of those available for the public?
we do.
We do.
There were
Can we just
brought
put those down
50
there?
copies provided,
Great.
so we should have plenty from that standpoint.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right.
This is the same presentation that I gave to the Board of Selectmen. Based on our vote yesterday, vote of the board, there were a number of what I'm going to call smaller changes that kind of balanced out so that the big numbers didn't change. The recommended mill rate is still the same. The recommended increase is still the same. I'm going to go through an introduction, the budget overview. I've included history and trends in here and a comparison to other towns. I won't take time to go through this year, but they are in the packet if you wish to look at them later. By way of introduction, I want to thank our department managers, our CFO, Bob Mayer, our finance department, as well as Dr. Jones and school administration, And certainly a thank you to all the volunteers that contribute their time to make our town special. The objectives this year are pretty clear. We want to manage our expenses and still provide high-quality services. We want to fund all our essential services. We also want to fund our long-term obligations, our pension, OPEB, surplus, and senior tax relief. We want to provide support and funding to our top-quality school system and continue to strengthen our financial foundation. Starting with the town side. As an overview, the town side budget recommendation is $1.36.1 million. That's a 3.54% increase over the prior year, and it's a total dollar increase of $4.65 million. The town side expense drivers. The primary expense drivers for this budget are salaries and wages. I would point out that we have all union contracts settled but one, and it's one of our smaller unions, so you'll see that reflected in the department budgets when you look at those in more detail. We've restored money to paving. We have a major increase in our supplemental contribution to surplus, which is over $1 million. Our capital replacement, and again, that's primarily Public Works trucks. Both the paving and Public Works trucks are numbers that we've adjusted in prior years to deal with some revenue shortfalls, but we've restored major portions of those this year. And our debt service. When you look at some of the positive expense drivers, and these are some of the things that came in a bit lower than we might have anticipated, our health insurance. We're seeing some good experience so that we're able to not see as large an increase there. Our pension, the pension board investments have done pretty well, and we're getting the benefit of that. And our workers' comp expense, that's actually a reduction, and what we're seeing is that the safety committees we've installed over the past few years are paying off, and we're seeing good benefit on that side. Moving on to the Board of Ed recommendation. The Board of Ed recommendation is $181.7 million. This represents a 4.59% increase, and that's a reduction to the superintendent's request by about $700,000. This is a total dollar increase of $7.97 million. BOE expenses, as we pointed out pretty much every year, also include a number of items that are on the town side of the budget, and I've listed them here from debt service to workers' compensation, insurance, nursing costs, police and crossing guards, purchasing, unemployment insurance, finance, and DPW. This adds about, comes up to about $24.4 million. So when you add that into the Board of Ed request, the total Board of Ed expenses in this budget are $206.1 million. This is a number that we do report to the state every year. It represents 65% of our overall budget, or another way of saying that is 65 cents out of every tax dollar goes to the Board of Ed. This continues to make a strong statement about Fairfield's commitment to education, especially with the continued uncertainty in the education funding from the state. When we take a look at the revenue drivers, on the negative are really ongoing issues. They're not new this year. The loss of the tax revenue from the GE property and the loss of municipal aid from the state, these are items that are not coming back and we're still going to be dealing with. On the positive side, we've had some positive grand list growth, almost 1%, the highest grand list growth we've seen since 2007. We've had some strong investment income growth, increase in pilot fees, and I must, in explaining that, we've kind of gone back and forth on that from a budget number. Our budget number last year showed a reduction. When the budget passed at the state level, we got more in pilot money than we'd expected. So that's what we're showing here when this budget compared to last year's budget is an increase in pilot fees. And we're also planning on potentially using a tax sale, and we have included some use of reserves in this budget. So overall, where we stand is this budget recommendation is at $317.8 million. This is a total dollar increase of $12.6 million over the prior year. This would bring us in at a recommended mill rate of 26.95, and this represents a 2.24% increase. And I do want to thank our department heads again for helping us put together this budget and get it to this point. When I look at any one-year number, as you know, you can have some ups and downs, but taking a look at a five-year average, I think we've showed a pretty strong record here in terms of the town expense budget increase on average over the last 5 years has been 1%. The Board of Ed expense budget increase on average has been just over 3%. This is combined for an expense budget increase of 2.2%. And we've come in at a mill rate increase on average over the last 5 years of just a smidgen over 2%. This is the lowest five-year average tax increase in the last 25 years. The five-year accomplishment, I think, is even more noteworthy when you look at the fact that Connecticut hasn't recovered from the worst of the recession since the Great Depression, and this has really limited our grand list growth. We've lost several $7 million in state aid, including a reduction in our educational cost sharing from $3.5 million to $1 million. We've lost almost $2 million in tax revenue due to the purchase of GE by Sacred Heart. And we've continued to invest in our schools in major capital projects, including Riverfield, Ludlow, Holland Hill, and Sherman. So in final summary, this budget recommendation meets the challenges facing our town today, meets our long-term obligations, continues our support for the high-quality education in our school system, and recognizes the need to keep Fairfield affordable, as well as maintaining our valuable services. The rest of the packet has some of the history and trends that we've included in past years, but I will leave that for you to go through at your leisure rather than stepping through all that tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Let's ask some high-level questions and comments. We'll go from there. Mr. Marmion.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion from our governor, our new governor, about the transfer of pension costs. I know the Board of Selectmen was having a discussion in terms of what do we do with this. I think it was close to $700,000 that he's proposing he transfers for our next budget. Was there discussion at the Board of Selectmen level? Or is this now included in our budget on the expense side, or what are we doing with that?
Okay, there was, first of all, when you look at the proposal, it's $700,000 the first year, $1.4 million in the second year, and just over $2 million in the third year. That represents 25% of the normal cost, and that is the proposal. As we found out in past years, that the governor's proposal, and this governor in particular, has said, as he did with tolls, he put a couple different options on the table for discussion at the General Assembly level. His initial proposal came out after this budget was kind of put to bed in terms of going to print. The Board of Selectmen did discuss that, and we were pretty united in our opposition to that. We didn't want to put it in here and assume that, have that be a show of acceptance of that, and we're committed to fighting this every step of the way.
Yes, you can.
So basically, the General Assembly isn't voting until maybe June or so. That's after we'll have voted on our budget, correct? So
Correct.
The timing is a little screwy in terms of we would then have to go back and, I mean, depending on what's passed, because we don't know, but we're going to have to work backwards, basically, depending on what is actually passed in the General Assembly. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the issue we have every year. The state
Right.
passes their budget somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks after pretty much every town, municipality in the state has passed theirs. We have repeatedly gone to the state and said, look, can you at least decide on municipal aid early in the process so we know what to do with our budgets? They haven't been able to manage that change. But at this point, we're not willing to concede, and that was the consensus on the Board of Selectmen, that we want to fight this and don't want to show that we're just going to accept this. And it's not this year's number. This year's number is not the number. It's the next 2- and 3-year numbers, and that's assuming that 25% somehow holds. I'm not sure.
What do you mean by it's not this year's number? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
That it's next year's 1.4, next year after that's 2.1. This will
Right,
be the
you're saying that this
fastest
is-
growing
right.
line item in our budget.
Right,
If
so it
this-
goes from 600 to 1.4 to 2 million.
If
is what
this
you're
were
saying.
just 700,000,
Right.
I wouldn't be happy about that, and none of us would. but that's a much smaller number than 2.1 million 2 years from now.
Right.
And that's assuming, as I said, the 25% is somehow a stopgap.
Right.
Or a stopping. I'm not sure that that 25% won't change to 35% or 45% once we get to 25%.
Right. It's the whole comment of once you get your head in the tent.
In terms of the likelihood of this passing, I've followed up with the executive director at CCM to see what they're sensing from around the state and what their staff at the Capitol has said, and the results are mixed in terms of whether this would pass, whether it won't pass. Certainly there was one 2 years ago. We fought that every step of the way. We kept that from passing. I would point out that we also didn't get a budget in June, so we had longer time period to pass that, or to fight that. This one starts much smaller, has some different wrinkles in it to make it, on one hand, for some people, perhaps more palatable. Philosophically, I'm opposed to the concept, and I think that the transfer, if it gets started, is the proverbial camel's nose inside the tent. It will continue to get bigger every year.
Other questions, comments? Mr. DeWitt?
Just a follow-up on that. Thank you to Mrs. Marmion for bringing that up, because that is the big elephant in the room, right? And my concern, this is the third-ish year that we've been talking about this, maybe the second year, but we've got a brand-new governor. We have no experience with, if he's going to push this through.
Brand new legislature, too.
And new legislature. Good point. And I agree with not conceding putting it into budget, but I think we need some plan. There's some backup plan that we need to have, because this, just like I think we're going to hear with the Board of Ed maintenance, we defer it, gets bigger, defer it, gets bigger. This number's not reducing. It hasn't reduced in the last 2 years when the government didn't push it down to us. So, much to your point, 700,000 this year turns to 1.4 next year. Well, if it gets pushed down next year with those two combined at 2.1, that's a real problem, right? So.
Well, the 2.1 would be the third-year number as
No,
it's
I'm saying
estimated
if
now.
they started combining those numbers.
No, it starts at 700. The next year, that 700 grows
I'm
to
with you.
1.4.
If somebody decides they can defer this year and push it to next year, that number's got to get bigger.
If it gets passed this year, you can pretty much count on it being in for the next 2-3 years forever.
Right.
This is not a one-year.
I'm with you. So that's why I'm saying it would be nice. We need to have some plan at least about how we can address this. Because when it does come, we're all going to be sitting here in June, like Mrs. Marmion said, well, we're going to find $700,000. And those are going to be hard decisions, right? And the Board of Ed budget will be set, and we can't reduce that, so.
Mr. Mottola?
So, if this, God forbid, happened, would it be a BOE expense, or would it be a town expense? I mean, I know which budget would it be under?
At the moment, it would probably be something we'd handle on the town side because of the timing of it. We wouldn't have any choice. We're going to have to write out a check. I would expect going forward, if this passes, it would be something that would be handled on the Board of Ed side of the budget, since it would be, as we do
Benefit
with
cost.
teacher health insurance, it's specifically attributed to just teachers. That's where I expect it to become. That's where the concern is, that then this starts to impact our priorities for education. We're
Right.
sitting here trying to balance and invest in our education, and when this gets handed down, it causes a rethinking of those priorities and puts a tremendous amount of stress on the Board of Ed budget.
So is the legislation, I know they have the numbers for 3 years going out, is the legislation written in a way that it's just for 3 years? It's going to keep
The
going?
legislation's written away, it's just for 2 years.
Just for 2 years?
It's a biennial budget. They pass a
Okay,
two-year budget.
so they would have to, all right. But I understand what you're saying. Once it's there,
Once it's there,
gonna be
I have a
there.
hard time believing it's going away.
Right.
And that's why we've asked for and because it's ramping up, that's why I reached out to find an estimate for the third year so we'd know what that is.
Okay. All right.
Says
Thank you. What is the payment mechanism and the timeline associated with it?
Obviously, that's all in play, but as it's written right now, I believe we write the state out a check by 12/31.
Thank you.
Anybody else? There's also, as regards that, there's also another item under consideration by the legislature. that could be concerning, which is that there's an item under consideration to turn the Board of Educations into taxing authorities, so that their budget would no longer fall under the auspices of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, but they would actually have the opportunity to pass their budgets. And then if the Board of Education approved that, that would be a separate tax bill to the citizens.
Yeah, I don't know the details of how that would be reviewed in the typical town. That would have to go out to the town meeting, if you will, so that would be a significant referendum on that side.
I don't know,
I'm not
that's-
quite sure. There are only a few towns that are organized like we are,
Right.
and I don't know the details of that. Perhaps, if you've read that more clearly, I haven't.
The way it was explained to me, I have read it, but I'm not a lawyer and don't play one on TV, even local TV. But the way it was explained to me is once they become a separate taxing authority, it stops at the Board of Education. I hope that's not the case. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think those hearings are starting pretty soon.
I would think if that ever happened, you would have government by referenda all the time.
I would-
We know,
And in
we
some
see how that
states,
works
they
in
do
some
that.
towns. They,
Right.
you know, Monroe, I think, does it. Every year they have
Right.
a challenge to it.
It's just something to pay attention to. There's a lot going on up there right now that could impact this town.
Yeah, when I heard that originally, I thought that it would still go to the RTM, but I have not read the language, so that's why I was looking to you for
Right.
guidance.
Right. We'll see. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so.
Following up on that, Mr. Tetra, have you talked to, that meeting starting tomorrow up in Hartford, and that's being chaired by our own representative, Kristen McCarthy-Vahey. Have you had a chance to speak to her about that, Bill?
When you say that meeting,
There's whatever committee she's serving on, the one I read about this bill, is she's chairing that committee that is going before tomorrow. Have you spoken to her about that bill?
and which bill is that?
It's HR.
You just described the bill, I don't need the number.
It's the one we were just talking
The one we were
about.
talking about.
The,
About the Board of Ed being able to potentially act as a taxing agency on their own to pay for their bills and also to basically issue, I think they might even be able to issue their own bonds for school buildings.
There was discussion.
yeah, I have not talked to her about that. I have talked to the folks at CCM,
Yeah.
and I'm not hearing a lot of support for that around. That's kind of part of what you try and do at this level, because all these bills go out before the General Assembly. Some have no chance, and some are on the fast track. And it's trying to get a handle of which is which, so you know which ones to,
Right.
where you are. It's my understanding that there's a lot of opposition to the separating the mill rates between the Board of Ed and the towns.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Because that'd be kind of scary, because it would allow, my reading of it was that if the Board of Ed wanted to build a new school, it'd be their decision. They could just issue a bond, and I think it said it would be, they'd be able to rely on the full faith and credit of our town. And not only for their budget would be able to tax, but they'd be able to bond money and then collect it from the taxpayers. It's the whole thing is this kind of, I mean, I only found out about it yesterday. Unfortunately, I was going to try to attend that hearing in Hartford, but I can't make it tomorrow because of a business appointment.
Yeah, I'd have to see the details. It's hard to believe that, and that they do that without the RTM approving it in our town. And I'd be surprised if the Board of Finance wasn't included that too, but
We
on the smaller towns where it's all town referendum, I don't see how they could buy the town meeting portion of that. But again, the problem with the way this is they do a rough outline of this, it goes
That's
through all these
correct.
public hearings, and then somebody massages the wording and everything else down the road. So that's why CCM, frankly, is so important, because our representatives / lobbyists stay on these bills all the way through to make sure that CCM's interest and our town's interest are represented as we go through the process.
Any other questions?
It'd be interesting if we can
Yeah.
get Representative McCarthy-Vahey before us to explain where this is going.
That'd be great, right after the...
She'll have a hearing tomorrow on it, so she might have a better idea, be able to explain exactly where this is.
It's certainly something to follow up on, absolutely. Can you take a note on that, please, for our minutes, and we'll follow up on that?
I'd also like to make a comment in regard to, I'm glad you're taking a strong stance in regards to the governor's proposal in regards to taking away some of our funds in regards to paying for the teachers' pensions. I mean, this is obviously, the teacher pension issue is something that was a Hartford issue that they failed on over many years. I really thought it was crazy, Governor Malloy's proposal that we had to deal with and be scared about last year, the year before.
2 years ago,
It's
I
2
think.
year ago? Okay.
Justice
Then it
Stewart.
kind of held us hostage, and I'm wondering whether we were going to be responsible for, I thought, at that time it was like $7 million?
Several million.
$9 million.
9 million, 7 and 9. okay,
To start.
Nine, yeah, to start. And I think it was wise that we're not putting any of this money in the budget to give any thought that we'd be willing to roll over on that. But as much as Governor Malloy's plan, I thought, was just a sole thought on his behalf, it's even scarier that we have a new governor come in who right away goes to the same issue of wanting to push this down onto the towns. Especially now, I mean, right away, without any notice that we're all trying to do the budgets, and as you mentioned earlier, we don't find out about theirs until after ours is completed. One thing that came to mind was, I met the new boss. He's kind of like the old boss, because this is the exact same thought process once again, where we're trying to take a Hartford problem, and they don't want to correct it because they don't want to look like they're raising their taxes. So just force it down onto the towns to correct our problem that we caused up here by raising the local municipal tax. So I'm glad you take a stance on that, and the Board of Selectmen did, and that you did not put any funds in, because I know I'm not planning on putting any in.
Anybody else? I did have a couple of comments on the presentation itself, Mr. Tetra. Did I? Please.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question on the revenue driver highlights, slide number 13. You mentioned on the positive side, the last bullet point is the tax sale and use of reserves. What reserves are we talking about? Can you kind of break that down for us?
One, there'll be more detail as we go through, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Mayor to describe that in more detail.
In prior years, portions of the surplus that have been realized by the town have been parked on the town's balance sheet to be used for the future. So the $1 million of the reserve is a utilization of that. It's actually the final piece of I think the board did that twice, Mr. Flynn? Yeah, so this is the final piece of that. And then $400,000, we have an over-accrual in our accrued salary from favorable experiences balance sheet account item. So that's $400,000 for a total of $1.4 million.
1.4.
$1 million parked.
Reserve and then 400,000.
Correct.
I had one other comment. that was my second comment. My first one was the grand list growth. And take this for what it's worth. This is what I'm thinking as we move forward, right? I'm just putting it into perspective. Because I had the opportunity to talk with a couple other members of boards from other towns, that we have a revaluation coming up, 2020, right? So this number, while it's good news, is not impacted by the fact that the revaluation, particularly in the section of town of Greenfield Hill, which, from my understanding, is getting significant pushback and pressure on prices in Greenfield Hill. Now, I've asked Mr. Mayor a while ago, actually, for some information on that, if we can get that for the budget process, because here's what concerns me as we move forward. You have Greenfield Hill that's really getting hit with their price points. Now, the beach is coming up a bit because there's been a lot of remodeling at the beach. There's been a lot of tear downs and rebuilds. That's already factored in here in some ways, because as the construction permits get issued, the value of that is factored into the grand list growth. So you have some grand list growth that are being driven by the tear downs and the remodels and everything going on that end of town, and that's factored in on the upside. What's happening on the Greenfield Hill side, where the values are coming down, is not actually factored in there unless those prices have been appealed. It's another question. What are the assessment values and what have been appealed? Because what we could have here in a situation we as citizens might be facing in 2 years is the fact that although we get spending quote-unquote under control at the levels it at, we could have a redistribution of the tax because the values in Greenfield Hill go down, the values in other areas don't make up for that slack, the tax gets divided across the entire town. We had that a few years ago in evaluation where, I think it was the beach area, correct me if I'm wrong, where it, for whatever reason, got revalued a number of years ago, and the prices in that side, and therefore the taxes in that side went extremely high as compared to what they had been, while other areas saw a diminution in their taxes for the same reason. In other words, it's how the pie gets sliced that changes. And that's what we may be dealing with here in 2020 when we do this revaluation. And my concern is people are going to be surprised that they get hit with a higher tax bill than they were expecting in that time period because their percentage of the whole is higher. Correct, Mr. Mayor?
That's correct. Am I on now?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's correct. The pie stays the same, the distribution of the pie gets changed.
Right. So we need to be careful of that, and that's why I asked for some information from the finance office. And where does that stand right now?
I just have to go over it one more time. I'll get it to you tomorrow.
That'd be great. So we can go through it when we look at revenue, and it's just something to be cognizant of as we review the budget going forward. Having sat through this before, I just remember the hue and cry from the areas of town that got hit, where they said, what are you guys doing with expenses? My taxes just went up by 14%. And it had nothing to do with actual spending. It had to do with the distribution.
That's the marketplace, right? I understand what you're saying.
We got to be careful of it because I think that's what people are thinking, that, hey, we're getting a good value here in this section of town or in this area for what I'm getting for services and what I'm paying on real estate taxes. That might not necessarily be the case in a couple of years when it gets revalued.
I hear you. Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? Mr. DeWitt.
I just keep following Mrs. Marmion tonight because I have a slide, a question on slide 13. Mr. Mayor, on the negative side, loss of tax revenue from GE. Is this not the second year that we've seen the total loss, right? He's not listening to me. Right. So we weathered that. Last year was the first weathering of that storm. So we're in the second year of not having this money. So
Yeah,
this is
it's-
the
it's-
last year for that excuse, right?
No, my point there is that that money's not coming back. We're going to have to.
Yeah, but a lot of things aren't coming back. So, I mean, it's like the Board of Ed telling us for 4 years that there was health care increases, you know. The new reality has been set, if you ask me, after 2 years of missing that income. We're not going to ever sell that and get that back. I'm with you. So now it's time to look for something to replace the 1.5 million.
Correct, as we started to do last year, but it's also something that it's good to remind people of, that we are still $6 million short from what we started there. That's not easy to overcome, and that's why we're partially restoring some of the items that we did, not fully restoring those. And it's also a reminder to other departments and other groups, as well as our residents, that we're still trying to make up that loss.
You can, Mr. Mottola.
So maybe this could be for Bob or the first selectman. So that we have an increase in pilot fees, and I remember talking about that over the last several budget seasons. There doesn't seem to be a whole heck of a lot of rhyme or reason what we get from the state. I think it's kind of they decide
it's
what
government.
to give us. Yes. So, do we know why is there an increase because now the
That's-
GE property is Sacred Heart property? Do we have any idea why it's gone up?
No, it was passed in last year's budget. So what we've basically done is keep it the same as the actuals from the prior year, but it shows as an increase budget to budget, because we'd actually budgeted that lower.
Anybody else?
Yeah, on the same slide, 13, you mentioned, Mr. Tetro, that I think you said possible tax sale. Is it going to be a tax sale or a tax sale or?
We have it in there.
Yeah.
And if we need it, we will use it. We're going to do everything we can to kind of save expenses enough to get there. So if we have years like we've had the last couple of years, we may not need to do it. But if we can't, then yes, we will.
What's the number that's in the budget?
Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, Mr. Walsh, I didn't mean to jump in.
The number for tax sale is $2 million. And that number is not necessarily realized through a tax sale. Basically, with the concept that there may be a tax sale, we would be having conversations and encouraging people to pay their prior year taxes sooner than they might otherwise pay it.
I
So
would
we
hope we're having those conversations anyway.
We enjoy the 18%.
Fair enough.
Not a bad thing.
Anybody else?
Bob, just on that, so if you put $2 million in here in revenue from the tax sale, I presume that you've taken an equal, not an equal number, but a number down on what you're going to be making on the 18% and what the collection rate, I guess, on some of the past taxes is going to be, correct? Because normally some of that would trickle in during.
Right, no, we have the prior year tax budget is the combination of the 3-year average, which would be the normal, plus an additional $2 million.
But shouldn't it be a little, I mean, we could talk about this more. We'll talk about it more when we get there, but it just seems to me if you're going to sell those taxes away, we wouldn't normally, you
Well,
do
there's-
something less than the 3-year, a little less than the 3-year average.
Yeah.
Because some of those taxes are being sold away.
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but it's a replenishing supply.
Okay.
It's kind of like sustainable,
During revenue, a little bit
sustainable
more. Okay.
food or whatever. Sustainable
Anybody else?
farming.
Thank you. The conversion of the property on Stratfield Road from the synagogue to now the commercial project, Sunrise, what was the first year of realized gain on those property taxes?
Wow, I don't know.
I mean, it's a very partial offset to GE, but it's just an example of.
We can certainly get that for you, but the grand list absorbed most of the G loss last year.
Yeah.
So this is growth
Right.
coming from that. We can certainly provide that information, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
All right, thanks.
Just to comment on that, I think I read somewhere that there's another assisted living facility, Sturgis Ridge, and that had contributed to the grand list. I don't know what percentage, but it was significant. That and another, there was two.
We've got 3 assisted living
Three,
facilities.
with the new one on Stratfield Road.
Right.
So I know that contribution of the other 2 was significant, so I'm expecting it will
Yeah, there's-
also add.
There's those 3, as well as there's some utility investment that also. So we got a lot from our utility companies and our service providers that actually paid as well. So that spurred the growth that wasn't offset by the other stuff yet. Anybody else? All right, seeing none. Mr. First Selectman, feel better.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. All right, everybody. The second part of the evening is the not-for-profit organizations. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone from the not-for-profits for everything you do for the community. I'd also like to thank you for being here tonight and advocating as necessary for your organizations. What we started doing, there's, for lack of a better way to put it, there's a lot of gray hair up here, and many of us have been here for many years, and have heard the presentations and read the books of all the great work that everybody has done. So a few years ago, to try to cut back on the time, we've turned this into a flip. So we'll, instead of hearing presentations from everybody, we will flip the page, I will call out the organization, and then if there's any questions, we would call you up to the table to answer those questions. You are not compelled otherwise to come to the tables and speak. But I don't want that to mean that you're not welcome. It's just you are not compelled to do so, and that in no way gets held against you in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, there's just a lot of experience. And for those of you that, you know, in business, they tell you once you have the sale, you just sit down. So with that, any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, we'll go to the Regional Youth and Adult Social Action Partnership. This budget is flat.
No.
Oh, no.
It's up
It's up
40%.
40% year over year. Well, we might want to hear to this one.
Yeah, that's the one I want to hear. That's
Does
the only
anybody
one I
have a
wanna hear.
question, comment on this one? Mr. DeWitt, who do we have representing this organization this evening? Boy, thanks for getting us off on a good note. Only a 40% increase. Welcome.
That's what I do. Mark Donald, Fairfield resident, Executive Director of Regional Youth Adult Social Action Partnership, AKA RISAP.
Thank you.
So I think the question pertains to, obviously, the increase. So as some of you may be familiar, in the legislation last year, they combined all the regional mental health behavioral boards into 6 regions. We became the fiduciary sponsor of Region 1, which essentially covers every town that touches the Merritt. How that impacts Fairfield is you essentially now have 2 different organizations. The acronym is SW, Swarm Hub, Southwest Regional Mental Health Board, and then you have RISAP. So essentially there's now 2 organizations serving in the mental health capacity, substance abuse prevention, as well as opioid prevention and treatment. So now there's 1 or 2 organizations under 1 line item on your budget.
Okay. Questions, comments from board members? Anything else?
How does that combination equal an extra $6,000 required?
So you're taking some of RISAP services to the town and some of Southwest Regional Health Mental. So last year they were combined. So now we do mental health and addiction, treatment and intervention.
Oh, Linda answered your question. Southwest went down by 6? Thank you.
Yeah, it's 2.
Thank you.
0, I'm okay.
She said it much more eloquently than I did.
She knows me, that's why.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to hear me talk.
She wants to get out of here.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Linda. Cut right to the chase.
All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right.
Jump in whenever you can, Linda.
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
I think that's the most I've heard Linda talk in a couple of years here.
She's trying to set a tone for the budget meetings.
She's done. All right. Pequot Library. It's flat year over year. Questions, comments, concerns, Pequot Library. Seeing none, we'll move forward on that one. Gee, the $21,000 budget, we talked for 5 minutes. The $350, not so much.
No increase.
Right. LifeBridge Community
Don't
Services.
challenge me, Flynn.
I know. LifeBridge Community Services. This budget is flat year over year, 175 last year, 175. That's 175,000. Do we have a question?
I have a comment, if I may.
Comment,
Just want to
please.
say I'm a proud former board member of Fairfield Counseling Services, which falls under the auspices of LifeBridge Community Services. So I want to just thank the co-chairs who are here of that board and thank the organization for what they do.
Thank you. Anybody else? Next, we'll go to the Discovery Museum. It's flat at 24,000 year over year. Questions, comments on the Discovery Museum? Seeing none, we'll go to the Connecticut Audubon Society. It's $15,000 flat year over year. Questions, comments on the Audubon Society? Seeing none. We'll go, I believe the next one is the, and Linda, please, if I skip something, these pages are really sticking together. My dexterity is going. The Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority is $30,000, and it's flat year over year. Anybody on this item? Seeing none. We have the Fairfield Museum and History Center, $50,000 flat year over year. Any questions, comments, concerns on the History Center budget? Seeing none, we'll go to Health Minds Connecticut. That was Southwest, and Chris, here's your offset. You see that?
Yep.
All right, and then we'll go to the Janus Center for Youth in Crisis. And this has gone down 100% here. Can we just have a comment on this one? Somebody here? Mr. Tetra.
First selectman took it
In looking at this organization, I eliminated this year from the budget, because it was down to $2,000 a year, and suggested that what they really need to do is combine with other organizations, get a bigger critical mass to help out with their funding.
And is that, do you know what they're doing? Is that what they're doing, or?
I don't know, that was my recommendation to them, that
Okay, and any other
our
communication?
$2,000 wasn't making a difference in what they were doing, and it did.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns on this one? Go ahead, Ms. Marmion.
So it says here in the description that they're there to provide guided intervention and supportive services to children from Greater Bridgeport.
I did.
So are they serving kids in Fairfield at all?
A few, but not many. And their focus really is elsewhere, and that's why I was suggesting they really need to.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. The next one is Grassmere on Park Adult Services, Adult Day Services. This one is actually down by 30% from $65,000 to $45,000, and it looks like the request went down. Do we have a representative from this organization in the room this evening? Please, come on up. And thank you for being here. Can you state your name and your address and all that good stuff and your title, and then go into a little bit about what's going on, if you wouldn't mind?
My name is Laura Snow Robinson. I'm Director at Jewish Senior Services. Oops. Sorry, get closer.
Yeah, that's better.
My name is Laura Snow Robinson. I'm a Director at Jewish Senior Services, which operates Grassmere on Park Adult Day Program. We serve, most of you are familiar with our organization. We serve older adults, mostly who are experiencing dementia. The request is we're trying to make it commensurate with the usage by Fairfield residents, so that 28% is helping us cover the shortfalls that we're seeing in funding from other sources, namely Medicaid and other services that people get subsidies or assistance to attend. Most of our clients are coming through the Agency on Aging or our private pay residents who are trying to balance their limited dollars for aging in place at home. So they come to us daily and receive those services.
And where, did that request come from the administration to adjust it based on utilization by Fairfield residents? Where did that?
From our administration or from the
From the town administration, I'm sorry.
Yes, it was a conversation we were having, yes.
Is the utilization year over year pretty similar, or does it vary widely?
I would say it's fairly similar. You know, we see, yeah, I would say it's pretty similar. We do see a slight dip in recent years with some of the trends in the aging services industry, but we're always trying to make sure families know about services like this, because it truly is one of the most cost-effective ways to help people get assistance in their homes, and it really helps families who are still working as well at somewhere for a loved one to have a both social and medical, clinically supervised environment during their day.
Okay, you're fine with this reduction? That's not a.
I
Sounds
think,
kind of like a loaded question.
sure.
don't
I
mean
think
it
in
that
an
way.
organization like ours, every single dollar contributes to the
Right.
quality that individuals receive, and it all matters to us. But we really appreciate the support from the town. We've had a long history working with both centers, historically Grassmere and our Adult Day program, which we combined, and we understand it's a partnership to make it happen for residents.
Thank you. Do we have other questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, thank you so much. We'll go to Sullivan McKinney Elder Housing, and this is also a reduction of about 39.5% from $16,500 to $10,000. But I think there was an anomaly last year because it was $7,200 the year before, and I seem to recall something. Is there someone here representing Sullivan McKinney?
Didn't we
Yeah.
have to give them more money last year?
We did because there was an
Because there was
adjustment.
a
Yeah.
problem with the building or something?
Yes.
I think that's what it
They
was.
only ask for what they need.
Yeah.
Did you hear?
I just want to
Linda?
make sure. Mrs. Durkee, that's correct. We had a one-time adjustment last year, right?
Yes.
For one-time projects, so this is consistent with previous years.
Time we come, it's usually a one-time project.
Right.
This year, it's working on the facade of the side of the building. And it's $10,000 as far as I can tell. I think
Right.
you have all the information.
We do. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing something. So I thank you so much.
Okay,
All right.
that was easy.
That was an elevator last year.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The Kennedy Center. This is flat year over year at $7,000. Questions, comments, concerns? Kennedy Center. Seeing none, we'll go on. Mill River Wetland Committee, $5,000. This is flat. It's been flat for quite some time. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll move along. The Pilot House, this is $8,000, and it is flat from prior years. Questions, comments, concerns on the Pilot House? Seeing none, we'll go to the Center for Family Justice, $6,100, and again, it's flat. Anybody, and this is the last one for the not-for-profits that I have, or not-for-profit partners. Anybody?
I just have a question.
Yes, please.
Mr. Tetra, would you be able to come up to the microphone? I just want to ask you a general question. I understand Operation Hope came to try to get on this list. What was the reasoning for not putting them on the list?
That we were still short $6 million, and I wasn't looking to they never formally requested that through their executive director, just to be clear, but that's one of the reasons for mentioning the fact that we're short that revenue, that we're not, that wasn't a one-time hit and it all came back this year. It's gone, and the same issues we had last year, we're still struggling with this year.
Okay. No, it just seems that they're, I don't know, one of the most successful nonprofits around that was based here. It's got a lot of work done, and it just seemed odd that they wouldn't qualify to get on our list, even for a couple of $1,000s or whatever. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'm just going to open up the mic, for public comment. Is there any public comment on any of the not-for-profit organizations at this point? Seeing none, we thank those representatives for being here tonight, and more importantly, for all the hard work they do for our community. They've been good partners for us and provide valuable services, so thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to the ever-exciting administrative and general budget departments. We're going to start at page 44, which is the first selectman's office. I'll make a motion, we eliminate the position. Do I have a second?
That might save costs in election fees, too.
I heard you, Mayor.
There we go. Okay. Mr. Brown, can you take it for a minute?
Anything, Mr. Tetro?
Not really. It's other than the salary line, it's pretty flat year to year. I think in travel and meetings, we've been running over a bit, so we went for something closer to the 3-year average.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Ms. Merriam?
So there's a negative 71% on the maintenance and repair equipment, which is nice. I know it's not a lot of money, but what's going on with that?
We just went back and looked at what we were using, and, you know, it's only a couple $100, but if we can free it up, we'll free it up.
One thing, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Go ahead.
This budget will additionally be affected by a vote this year by this board, among others, to evaluate the salaries of the first selectman and the 2 selectmen, correct?
Will be a vote by the Board of Selectmen. Yes.
Oh, sorry, right.
And the plan
I
right
saw
now
you-
is it would be something we'd take out of contingency. It's really only because
It's a small amount of money,
it doesn't
right.
take effect until November, December, late November, early December. It's roughly 6 months of the year. It's a small amount of money, so.
Yep.
Mr. Tetra, what's the process right now for that, if you don't mind? Because I know there's
We're
been
going
talk about that.
to, I talked to the other selectmen. We thought we would try and use the same process we used last time around and ask Board of Finance to select 1 member, 2 members total, 1 member from each party, do the same for the RTM. Let those 4 people come up with a recommendation. We just vote that in.
And so when's that request going to come? Are we getting that right after the budget process, or when's that?
Probably shortly. It's
Okay.
just, we just confirmed that was an okay process an acceptable process at our last Board of Selectmen meeting.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Walsh?
Is the chief of staff position still a part-time position, half-time?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to confirm that. Thanks.
Anybody else? Mr. Brown?
If I remember right, the funding for the strategic plan was in the first selectman's budget? which started out as $100,000. How much have we spent of that?
I'm going to turn to the Finance Department to ask, but I believe it's either all spent or all obligated.
I know the committee has hired a consultant, but I don't know what the billings has been, but I can get that to you if you want.
So the committee's hired a consultant, they're moving forward,
Right. Yeah, they meet every
consultant?
couple
Yeah,
Mondays a week.
they've been working on it for the past year or so.
So let me,
Where's that money coming from?
thank you. Thanks for the question. Couple things. I met with, my apologies, I met with Mr. Wynn, who's the chairman of the committee, a few weeks ago. He did indicate that the majority of the funds, as the first selectman had said, are committed, have been spent. I'm working with our consultant. He is also going to come before our board within the next few months after we get done with the budget process, probably in the May timeframe, to give us a status update of where they are on their work. I would not be surprised, and I do not want to put words in his mouth, but based on where they are in the process, I would not be surprised if there's a request coming for additional funds, not due to quote-unquote phase one in the recommendations, but go to ongoing needs relative to any implementation and as such, and building out more formal recommendations from that committee.
So where would those funds come from?
It's a good question. I don't know. Have you spoken with Mr. Wynn at all? I know
no
it'd be contingency.
No request has come to me or the Board of
Right.
Selectmen at this point.
And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't think they're there yet, but I would not be surprised, during this fiscal year if it comes, this upcoming fiscal year. So thank you for bringing that up. So, Mr. DeWitt.
To follow up on Mr. Walsh's question, the chief of staff position is represented as a full-time position.
Oh, yeah, sure. Circle.
It shouldn't be, it's part-time.
1.0,
That's a 1.0 part-time person.
That's a deputy chief of staff. That's the clerk. That's
so what is the deputy chief of staff that Mr. Walsh is referring to? This,
talking about the chief of staff below on the part-time line, current part-time current. That used to be a full-time position.
it says 1.0.
Okay, that's deputy chief of. There's a deputy.
No, I'm looking at chief of staff. Part-time current,
That's part-time.
chief of
That's
staff.
part-time. That's just one. That's just one.
So that is the part-time,
Part-time position.
so the 48,709 is the part-time,
Yes.
the half-time
Yeah.
Yes.
salary.
It-
Yes.
If you look at that chart, you'll also see that it says 2.0 Selectmen, and they're both part-time.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the first selectman budget? Or the office of the selectman budget? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Tetro. We'll go to the town clerk. And I saw Mrs. Brown here, welcome. And before we get into the expenses, can we look, Mr. Mayor, at the revenue items? And Mrs. Gardner, if you can help me out here. How you doing, Mrs. Brown?
Great. I was hoping you'd think I was a not-for-profit.
Thank you.
Flat.
You're not flat.
Revenue's on page 21, Tom.
Thank you so much. All right,
Hopefully your budget doesn't look like you're a not-for-profit.
all right.
Salaries.
So last year, we were at 2,228,000. This year, we're at 2,243,000. The largest item being conveyance taxes, and that is actually listed as flat. Am I reading this right? Well, pretty much flat. It's down 0.03%. Did you calculate this, Mrs. Brown, or was this Mr. Mayor? Can you tell us what's going on there? Why flat year over year?
It's basically a guessing game as far as with the real estate market. Our volume is very good right now. I'm projecting that we're going to hit our target for the budget for June 30th. Right now, I'm at 1.2 million in conveyance with $130,000 in non-residential. Everything else is residential or unimproved land.
Are you sandbagging us here? No.
No.
Can we take, Mr. Mayor, what are you seeing on this side as well, just as a cross-check? Do you have any concerns on the conveyance side? Do we have any upside that you see on the conveyance side based on what you're hearing?
I mean, I have no idea what's going on in the real estate market. I think we're probably running a little bit ahead this year.
Yeah, there's a commercial
there's gonna
sale
be a-
expected this week on the Post Road, too.
So
There is.
there's some positives this year, but, you know.
And that's factored in, by the way, to you, when you're saying we're going to hit our number this year, is that commercial sale on the Post Road factored into?
That's what I'm hoping will hit this
Yeah.
number.
Okay.
There should be a positive variance. Look, right now it's looking at positive variance, but projecting the future, Ms. Brown has a much better handle on the marketplace than I do.
Okay. And I wasn't trying to imply otherwise, I just wanted.
I'm just stating the obvious.
Right. Okay, anybody else have any questions on conveyance or any other fees in this area? All right, seeing none, let's turn to the expense side of your budget. Go ahead, Mrs. Brown.
Everything's flat. The increase is due to the salary settlements with the CBAs. I cut down postage. We do a lot of e-recording now, which has reduced my cost for postage returning items. But postage went up, so we'll be sending out absentee ballots, dog licenses.
Quick question, and this is from Mrs. Gardner. We've had this anomaly in the past when we have a year where a lot of contracts get settled, where the variance looks worse than it is because in the last year's budget, the amount wasn't in there, right? We usually get kind of a schedule that lays that out. Do we have that yet?
What we did is we provided you with the revised, in which case the transfers have been made for all the settled contracts. So if you look at that revised document, it's on the website, and I think we...
So is it in this budget book that I'm looking
No,
at right in front of me?
No, it's not going to be in this budget book. It's gonna
Can
be
we get
something-
printed out copies of that? Because this would make it appear that the salary increases were more substantial than I think they probably were, because we're comparing a number from last year that didn't have it in it.
Right, yeah. Right, this year with all the contracts are in, all the CBAs are in force with the exception of ECC through next year. So the only contract that's not.
I get that,
got
Mr. Mayor. That's not what I'm asking.
So you're asking for the delta?
Correct, 'cause-
Between what it was last year, got it, I got it.
Correct, after the transfers were made, so that we're looking at true variances. Here, I hope they're a little skewed.
Yes, they will be, but don't vote those. I'll send them to you tomorrow.
2%.
Perfect. Yeah, and it's showing much higher here, and that's why we want to take a look at that. Does everybody understand what I'm asking for on that? Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this budget for Mrs. Brown?
And we'll be affecting this salary line, our board will be this year with the town clerk's salary.
I believe that's true. Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll go to the, we'll just check the full-time current staff. The positions remain the same. You see the salaries there. Going once, going twice. We're all set. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. All right. We'll go to page 49, which is Fair TV. Hello. So we're going to $56,000 from $54,000 this past year, so an increase of $3,000. Is that correct?
That sounds correct, yes.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So you want to...
Andy Jones from Vice Chairman of Fair TV.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. Talk to us a little bit about what the increase is, a modest increase in hourly rates and courier services.
Well, those are the sort of ancillary, small, tiny fees or services that we do other than the bulk of our budget, which is to pay Fairfield's version of the hardest working man in show business, Jerry Spino.
Okay.
So what you mentioned, I think, are just very minor, small things.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
What other revenue sources do you have other than this money that comes in from the town?
Sure. The Cable Advisory Council distributes money to us from the services and fees collected from the cable company.
So what's your total budget for the year?
It depends. We're encouraged by them to ask on an annual basis and to make it as a real need request. So, we've every year tried to come up with things we want to do or try to improve upon either equipment-wise or project-wise, and we make those requests annually. And again, they've requested that we try to do it on an as-needed basis, so they fluctuate.
What's the ballpark?
I'm trying to get a sense of
Yeah.
how much you spend in a given year.
I think, let's say, from them, you mean, from that source?
No, your entire budget, or how much do you spend in a given year on top of the funds that we've been giving you?
On top of the funds you've been
Or
giving
what
us,
the
let's
whole
say.
amount is that you spend in a
Okay.
given year. Just
Okay.
give that, I can do the math.
I'm going to guess around roughly 85,000 to
Oh, okay.
to 90,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't get that much other funding?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah, I just had a question. That's what I was trying to get to.
Okay.
I didn't know whether you're getting 250,000
Oh,
and
no,
we're
no, no.
50, an additional 50, so, okay.
Right, yes,
Okay.
no.
Great.
So it's under $100,000 that's spent for all of Fair TV.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
Of which we're 60-70% of the overall funding.
Roughly correct, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments,
Sorry.
concerns? Thank you so
Can I
much.
just ask you one question? On the,
Sure.
on your special department supply, are these like cameras and stuff like that that you're purchasing?
I'm sorry, could you remind me of
Under the special department supplies,
and what was that, I think, forget,
All the
3,000?
cavalry.
3,000, yeah.
Yeah, go if you can be more exact.
To answer that question, it's usually what we call expendables.
Yeah.
Things that we buy on an as-needed basis, cables,
Okay,
tape, carpet, microphones if we need them.
great.
But it's really just small elements.
Okay. Sometimes you come to us with larger things, like
Well,
because you're
maybe-
trying to upgrade your service or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean.
So it's nothing big like that?
No,
or-
no,
okay.
that's a small
Great.
element.
I was just trying to get a sense of what that was for. Thank
No
you,
worries.
Jerry.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
No, thank you.
For those of you who don't know, that's Jerry Spino, who is usually behind the camera. So.
I was hoping that someone would have to tell Jerry to speak into the microphone. It didn't happen.
That would have been great.
Excellent. I wish you had given me the heads up. That was fantastic.
Remember last year when he actually had to come from behind the camera to answer a question?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Chris, you know he's going to have you look terrible
All
at the
right.
next meeting. I know enough not to mess around with Jerry. Okay. We'll go to page 54 in our budget books. This is the Registrar of Voters. This is a relatively large increase this year, 5.58%. Some of that is driven, I guess, by this transfer of payroll. Seasonal
of that.
payroll, huge. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you. All right. Talk to us, please.
Okay. Everything's pretty much having to do with the increases with the fact that we're going to have a presidential primary. It's going to go into 2020, and that presidential preference primary. So that's a big reason for some of the increases in the main lines. That's pretty much it. I don't know, Matt, do you have anything else you want to add?
Anticipating the question, I made a couple notes of things that we've increased. We have an increased volume of applications coming to us through online and DMV-based voter registration. A lot of these are not meaningful changes. Someone will re-register, but we still process it and send them a notification. That's a part of the increase in postage. One thing that we have added.
Why are you paying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
What's
but
that?
why does that increase your cost? I'm trying to understand that.
We mail a letter confirming any application that comes into our office. So when you register to vote, we confirm it by mailing you a letter, and we know that you don't live where you've claimed if that letter comes back to us. So that's a part of our election integrity process that we do.
And that's required.
Yeah, we don't have any discretion in that.
Well,
Okay.
One thing that we have for the last couple cycles put a mailing pre-election notifying people of special needs services, their polling places, where to get sample ballots in their mailbox is an official nonpartisan election mailing. One thing that is in this related to the primaries, we see, I'd say the greatest complaint that our office faces from the public is people who arrive at their polling place not aware that they're not in the party they expected to be. So prior to the primary, we're going to do another one of those mailings we've been doing in the general election, and also putting on there the parties that people are in, and say, well, if you want to vote in a primary that you're not registered in that party, you know, here's the deadlines applicable to you to do that. So that's that is one sort of additional thing that has been put in here that was not in previous primary years. And the other sort of increase factors is that for municipal elections, we have a larger number of ballots because we have each district receives its own ballot, whereas for a presidential year, we only have 3 ballots for the town. As a result, we get reduced price breaks on the ballots, right? We pay a larger price per ballot because we don't order as many of each kind. And we have much higher programming costs in fees and professional services related to the larger number of candidates that we have. So those are the sort of the big, you know, 3 or 4 digit increases that are in the document.
Mr. Matola, thank you for the explanation.
When's the presidential primaries? Did they move that? Is that in June of 2020? They're in April now. Okay.
It's April of 2020, yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks.
You know what I'd love to see, because we hear this every year, and it's not that I can't keep track of it, but it seems every year you guys are in here and say, well, this year's this is going on, this year that's going on. It'd be actually, Mr. Mayor, it'd be nice to see kind of a graph, right, of what happens with their operating expenses. Ignore like the salary side of it, you know what I mean? Not seasonal, I'm not talking to seasonal salaries, I'm just saying ignore like the headcount hasn't changed, but the seasonal changes. But to see what that cycle is of their spending and to plot that against like what the different elections are. Because you guys come up here every year and say, we're going to have a primary, or, you know, this is going to be, and
part of it, yeah,
I mean,
we may not know there's a primary too, by the way.
I understand that.
Some of the
And-
things is contingency to, no.
Right, well, there's
Not-
like.
Not officially, though.
There's like 42 people running for president on the Democrat side. I think it's largely, you know.
Is it up to that already? I must have missed, okay.
Yeah, it'll get up to 42.
Early.
I heard some mayors are going to jump in from small towns. Exactly. Right.
If you'd like to run, I
Good
think
luck
there's still
with that.
time to change.
He's going to wait till he gets his letter and he's
Right.
a confirmed Republican.
Exactly.
Can I bring up one thing that I've kind of been told that probably, I'm just going to throw it out there. I was trying, there was an entry in there for $1,500 for office supplies, and that's kind of what we've been doing. Well, we did it in fiscal 19. And I put in a 250. Matt entered
Fair.
his numbers, and I put the 250 in because we need to get signs. We have sign problems. They're disgusting. They're falling apart. We don't have enough of them. And I roughly put in 250 for about 50 signs, hoping to get them for about $5 a piece. Don't know if that's exactly what we would get, but the other thing is we're low by $1,500, and I just kind of throwing it out there. I know it's a semi-big increase, but if you could see there's a very large decrease in the.
So, Mr. Elworthy, what you're saying is there's a transposition error in your budget, and you meant to say the 1,500 plus the 250, and it came out as the 250 replacing the 1,500.
That's exactly what happened. I must have pressed the wrong button. So.
He wants 1,750.
You want 1750?
So what line can we get that out of?
That's what you want.
Great.
Can you, Matt, I think you talked about it without talking about specific lines, or both of you might have done the same thing, but, you know, can you just quickly tell me on these big jumps, the reasons for them? Like, let's just start with, I mean, I know you talked about the presidential primary, but fees and professional services, it goes up 32%, rounded to 32%. What's that for?
The largest number in that is programming our memory cards. It's a formula that says if you
Okay.
have this many candidates
Yep.
and you have this many districts, and at the end of that, it winds up being a number that's in the $5,000 to $6,000 range.
So you're saying that that'll be increased by that percentage for the municipal election, the possible presidential primary, or both?
presidential primaries, there's a minimum charge that we have that's $750. So if we had a Republican primary for president, for example, we'd expect probably to hit something close to the minimum for that. But it's we expect it to go up in municipal years and go down in state and federal years.
Well, that's what you were saying, right? Where all the machines have to be programmed 10 different ways because there are however many.
Yeah, to read each different kind
district.
of ballot in each
Right.
place. That's right.
Yeah, it's like way different, like in the state election, we had basically three ballots. Now we're going to have, as Matt
Right.
just
So
said.
presidential, there's one.
Yeah, but municipal, quite a bit more, plus many more candidates with the RTM alone, 80 candidates.
Some more programming.
Yes.
Is the printing and binding and photography line, it goes up for this year, 33.87, is that also because of the municipal year?
That's the lowered discounts for the sort of a lower volume of ballots for each district. So because we don't order, 10,000 ballots for the 132nd state rep district as we might in a federal year, and we're ordering instead 2,000 for each RTM district, we see sort of a higher price per ballot.
Okay.
So that's the largest number in there. Probably about 1,000 of that is related to the pre-primary sort of voter, nonpartisan voter mailing to people.
Okay. So that's the line where the ballots are bought?
That's right.
Okay. I presume that we over-purchased the number of ballots, right? Because I would hate to be one of these communities that runs out of ballots. I mean, you see them, people are handwriting them, copying them. We're going to have enough ballots, correct?
We have.
I mean, it would be embarrassing. I mean, it's not even, if it's going to take an extra $1,000, I would hate to ever see it on the front page, we're running out of ballots, and people are complaining that they're not getting their stuff in. It's just not even worth it.
I'll say that our practice is to look back at the last 3 similar elections in terms of ballot volume, and then increase that number by 20%. And so, that's always something that we debate and negotiate with among ourselves. If the town, in some years in the past, the town has said, well, we'd really like to have 100% ballots, one ballot for every voter in the town. And, it certainly doesn't bother us if that's the plan that we want to go ahead and do. That's just, we look historically and then budget an increase off of that historical experience.
Have we ever run out or come close to running out of ballots?
Oh, absolutely.
We have?
Yeah. The process that you would, certainly come close on a number of occasions. One of the things our poll workers do inside the polling place is monitor the supply for us as the day goes along. And if they say, well, we're really concerned about running out, we will dispatch additional ballots. We'll have usually some in our hands, right, like an overrun in the office available to dispatch. If it's a larger number, there have been a couple occasions where we've made copies for people.
So you said this happens on a number of occasions?
Coming close has happened on a number of occasions. I'd say actually cresting over and having a polling place call us and say, you really need to bring us another bundle is rare, but it has happened.
Okay. Well, it's kind of scary that we're coming close. Maybe that calculation needs to be amended to like 25% over, or whatever the last year is, something.
That's if you'd like us to go away and come up with a slightly higher number, I'm sure we could do that for you.
All right, I'll talk to you offline about it. Okay, and then the other 2 lines that are there's 3 lines going up, 25%, 24%, 26%. What are the same similar reasons for special departmental supplies, postage,
Yeah.
and travel and meetings? What's the travel? Well, let's start with travel and meetings first. Why is that going up?
The travel and meetings, it's something we have discussed historically with the Board of Finance, and it's an ongoing negotiation with the town Human Resources Department. Occasionally, people will say, well, we would really like you to use your own cars more to get to places, especially places that are remote from the town, training opportunities, things like that. At other times, people will say, well, we really want you to rely more on the town vehicles, so there's no mileage reimbursement. The increase in travel and meeting is entirely related to mileage reimbursement. Increasing from 0 to 200, I think, something on that order.
And what's the reason for the postage increase? Is that because of the postage costs going up?
That's the mailing for both the primary and the, when you agree, yeah.
Is that just because of the municipal year and the stuff you talked about earlier? Where you're telling people what party they're in, where they vote, things like that?
Yeah, so adding one mailing as a pre-primary contact
Okay.
to voters.
Yep.
And also just an increased volume that we see, because every DMV transaction is now a voter registration transaction as well.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Mrs. Esmond?
Thank you. So there's obviously an error in the formula on the communications line.
You can't divide 0 into 150. That's the reason why that happens.
Right. So
Yep.
just looking back, I mean, it was 1820. Can you just talk a little bit about that expense and how it's moved from?
Hold on, I just lost the budget in my.
Uh-huh.
Would you like to, or should I?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly, on the communications line.
Okay.
Um,
I can't see it.
Went
I
from
had it on my
0
phone.
to $150.
I would say that in the past, registrars have occasionally had cell phones paid for by the town. That is not something that Steve or I have, so that's the lion's share of the decrease. We also had an experience a couple of years ago where we received a large credit for the landline services that we have inside the polling places. For the next several years, we don't expect to have to pay for those because of the size of the credit on our account. So somewhere down the line, that number will jump back up. But for now, we have prepaid for our phone service inside.
Okay,
the
so
polling
that's why it went
places.
from 1820 to 0 at that
That's
point.
right.
And another question, if I can. So we had a real jump in turnout in November, correct?
Larger than a normal.
And you're projecting similar, you've said it probably in other ways, but you're projecting a similar increase in turnout, or at least the same as last time.
Well, the last one, I think there was energy on both sides. That was part of it. This one, you're talking, if we were talking about the municipal, I don't know that we could say that for sure. We're budgeting pretty much in line with what it's been.
With the last municipal.
Yeah, but the last one was definitely a situation where it was pretty active.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? We're good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a couple of quick comments. With respect to your question about the relative salaries last year versus this year, which is on one of the documents, which is on the internet, just the registrar is 2.0% and the town clerk is 1.5%. But this made me realize the clerks does not include Ms. Brown's salary, because this is the year that you guys need to vote
Yeah.
for the 4-year salary. I just want to make sure you knew
Bump
that.
that up.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So the net change, Bob, between the salaries that we're looking at the register of voters is actually the increase is a lot less because of the
Yeah, it's
change
an
in
exact
the-
2.0.
And for the town clerk, we would be voting for the salary for 4 years?
4-year salary.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We are on page 57, 58 for the zoning board of appeals.
Mr. Brown, I'm going to recuse myself from the next number of budgets, including zoning board of appeals, town planning and zoning, probate court, historic district commission, and conservation, because as an attorney in this town, I appear before those departments, and I just don't want there to be an appearance of any type of conflict that I'm controlling their budget. So I'm going to step out of the room.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So you will be back for shellfish?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Jim Wendt. I'm the planning director for the town of Fairfield.
Okay, and you have a negative 10.7% increase, which looks like it's due to advertising.
That's correct. This is a pretty small budget for the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we went with the 3-year average for postage, which is a $500 decrease.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Very good. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
You're all set.
I'm here for the next one as well.
Okay. Go ahead. Anything to review with us?
The town planning and zoning budget is pretty flat. If you exclude the regular payroll line item, it's an actual decrease of $736 of everything net of payroll.
Okay, so this is just increasing in salaries based on contracts, Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, I was doing some calculations. What was your question?
So it's a 4.57% increase due to salary increases based on contracts?
The salary is 5.4% overall. Everything else is in net negative.
Right, okay. Any questions on this budget? Ms. Sezema?
Thank you. How many vehicles? I just see that increase in the motor vehicle fuel and lube line. Just remind us.
We have 3 vehicles in our fleet. I would have to rely on Linda's calculations for how what the rates are, but our department has 3 vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Linda? Since this is the first time it comes up. Vehicle, fuel and lube that's a purchasing number that's just generated across every department for.
We updated that number, and if there's any news to impart to you before you vote, we'll do that.
Yeah, no, actually, we have solid pricing through the whole fiscal year this year.
Wow.
So
Cool.
it's a known number for diesel and gasoline and oil.
That's good news.
Yeah, Mr. Foley did a good job.
Nice.
Any further questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on page 62 for the probate court. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Kate Maxim. I'm here to present the probate court budget. As you can see, it is the same as last year and the year before. We're trying to keep our costs down. Anybody have any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions, Mr. Mottola? No? Any questions from the board? Okay. That was a quick
Thank you very much.
discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Joe.
being here. We're on page 64 for the Historic District Commission. Yes, sir. Are there any questions? Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No comments.
No comments?
Happy to be here, answer any questions. if
Yeah,
you have.
you can
Chris Shea, Chairman of the Fairfield Historic District Commission.
Okay.
Budget is flat.
Right, budget's basically flat from last year. So are there any questions on this budget?
I don't have any questions on the budget. I'm just curious about the handbook. Is that handbook kind of rules and regulations if you live in the historic section of town?
Yes, there's a handbook which is published online, and it's also, we make a dozen or 20 or so copies of it for citizens who request a copy of it, but we try to keep that really down to a minimum, and we only make them, every year the cover gets redone because we have commissioners that drop off and new ones that come on as their terms expire, so we need to update the cover every year.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very
My
much.
apologies, I had to step out. All right, we're going to go to page 68, conservation.
Well, you were out of the room. I pointed out to the rest of the board that the salary differentials for the Board of for the registrars and town clerk was 1.5%.
Speak up, please.
1.5% for the town clerk, and that's because it does not include Ms. Brown, because you guys need to vote on a 4-year. For the registrars, it was 2%, 2.0. For the last one, which showed, I think, at 5.4 or 5.6, is 3.8, because somebody got that was increased 2% for salary increases, and there was a member of the staff that got a step increase for $8,000 for increased responsibilities.
So what's going on, yeah, what's going on with conservation? It's huge. What is the deal here? The increase in salaries here? Hello.
Hello, Brian Carey, Conservation Director for the Town of Fairfield. The salary, the 10% increase is based on restoring a position that was actually eliminated from the budget two budget cycles ago and was never replaced. And I think we've talked about this over the past 2 years.
So how is this possible, though? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the numbers, not the dollar numbers, the headcount numbers. You just said it's
so if you go under conservation crewman, you'll see there's 2.
Yes.
And then under 19 approved, it's 51,000, and under projection for 20, it's actually doubling that. But the goal is, even though that's listed as conservation crewman 2, is to actually hire that at a lower position, a 6.
How long has
H6.
that position been open, Brian?
It's been it actually was eliminated, forced retirement in November 2016. It's been gone. So the person who had that position actually left in the middle of the budget cycle, and
we just didn't replace the
yes,
position.
you got that. That's right.
What's been the impact of that, though?
That's a laborer's position, so, I mean, things are getting a little, it's like if you cut the paving budget, roads aren't getting paid. If you cut the labor from my department, things aren't getting painted, trails aren't getting improved. We've been able to kind of mitigate some of that with hiring contractors to do some of the roadside mowing over the course of the past couple of years, and we've hired seasonals. Last year we had a good bunch of seasonals. The year before that, I can't always rely on that. I'd like to hire someone who can start kind of at the lower pay grade and bring them up through the department. Pay grade 6 is the lowest within the entire Public Works union, so there's only it would likely be someone who would be hired outside of the town, or it would be a lateral transfer from there's actually a 6th position in water pollution control.
So where is, okay, so I don't see a reduction in seasonal payroll.
No, so that is actually still 4 people we hire. I mean, we're talking about historically low labor levels in our department.
So I've seen contracted property services is going up. So the 2 lines that you said, hey, we had to do more contractors and more seasonal, and now I need to add back the position, which I'm not, okay, just take it in the spirit of the question. So why would those 2 go up? It would seem if we kept those flat and gave you back your position, you'd be okay.
So contracted property services actually, that's based on a bid. So I can't anticipate. It's a year that we would likely be going out to bid again. So I don't know. Historically, that's been pretty low on the side of our bids have come back extremely favorable for our mowing bids. And that's just something the town, our department should not really be in the business of doing anyways. I can't do it as efficiently, even with my in-house staff, as I can for hiring a contractor.
I was going to ask you, why isn't some of this stuff, and I know we've had this conversation in past years, but I've never been real clear on that line between DPW and conservation, because if you pointed out, there's times when conservation is doing things that are DPW-like related, right?
Because all of the open space properties by statute are split into conservation department under the charter, and basically parks and all the other parks.
What does that mean, though? I don't
So
understand.
if land is, I mean, you'd have to go through the charter and the Conservation Commission and Section 35 of the town charter. You go through and read it. All land that is not designated as parks, rec, whatever, falls into open space. And then the open space jurisdiction is managed under the Conservation Commission, which is through the Conservation Department.
So couldn't the Conservation Commission then outsource it to DPW? I mean, why couldn't they do a little internal contract that says?
We could, but they outsource their mowing too. My point is that
Beautiful.
My point is that union mowing, because of the way the contracts work and the breaks that are inherently built into the contract, it's not efficient. I mean, no town really does a large-scale mowing for, a lot of the roadside mowing we're doing is small little strips that are the side of this. But if they're not mowed, they become a nuisance for roadside
No,
cars.
I understand. I do
So-
understand that, but why wouldn't you then just give it to the contractors that are doing all sorts of work for us anyway?
Well, we could entertain bids for, I could bid out the work through a Public Works bid. I put my own bid out. I like to manage what's under my department. Could I give Scott Bartlett a list and say, hey, bid all these sites out as part of a Public Works bid? Absolutely, but that's my job to manage the bid, not Scott's. It's not under his.
That's bureaucratic. I mean, truthfully, if you have a letter of agreement between yourself as a conservation and say, I am your customer, Public Works, amend this to what you're asking your contractor to do, and I'm going to hold you accountable. It happens in business all the time.
It's not inefficient at all. I put out a separate bid, and the bid is managed through my department for the properties that are under my jurisdiction.
Sounds inefficient to me. If we already have because they might even just throw it in for free, or throw it in at a reduced
So,
rate.
I mean, I can bring in the bid amounts. I mean, I'm paying, next to nothing to mow all these roadside spots.
Maybe we can get it for nothing. You're paying $14,000. I'm just saying.
Plus, there's other contractual, I mean, the whole bid for the year is about $12,000 to mow, 36 sites throughout town.
My point being, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, my point being, if we have experts, quote-unquote experts, in DPW that take care of this type stuff.
I mean, I'd consider myself an expert. I ran the Parks Department in town of Stratford for 6 years, so.
Right.
I mean, I know a thing about putting
It wasn't
up
about
bids and
you, it's
cutting
just
grass.
about, it wasn't about you, it's about why do we have so many departments contracting this stuff out when we can do it through one and be set? That's my point. Yeah.
So I need to understand, so you're the money to replace the person who wasn't hired several years ago, and then you've got, is that person going to be doing the same thing that we're contracting out for? I'm confused in
they're a
terms, they're very
laborer
different.
from a day-to-day operation. It's a laborer's position. There'll be string trimming, and I hire seasonal help because during, just as Public Works or any maintenance facility, from March to November, we're working a lot outside, but from, the other time frame during the winter, there's not as much work going on. So having in-house staff enables us to do, work all year. I've been relying on seasonal staff that, they're high school and college kids, there's a training, there's a big training curve with them, and then I have them for 3 or 4 months, and then they're gone. Sometimes they do come back from season to season if they're good, and we invite them back. We've had some good luck over the years, but it's not as good as having dedicated town staff that come to work and we can train them and teach them. So we also maintain all the tide gates on a daily, basically on a daily and weekly basis. That's not something I can teach seasonal staff to do. I mean,
No, and I get that. So then I'm going, so to hire somebody, that person isn't going to reduce your seasonal payroll at all? In terms of, because that's sort of staying or
there's
going up
still enough
slightly.
work that I could have 3 full-time staff and then 4 seasonal workers. I mean, the seasonal workers, like I said, they're high school and college kids, and they help with, general string trimming and those types of labor activities, but they're not, like I said, full-time staff. I mean, I need someone we can train to start following. I mean, Ed and Tom and the people who work with me are, you know, we need to start bringing in the new crop of people to, you know, start learning the tricks of the trade in the conservation department.
Anybody else? Ms. Leclerc?
So what hasn't been done the last 2 years that we need this extra person? I guess that's where I'm trying to understand, that we haven't had them for 2 years and somehow you've
So, I mean,
gotten by.
there's a lot of internal work, like tree removal. I can't send 2 guys out there to cut down a big tree if the job requires 3. Trail maintenance, you know, painting. I mean, we're basically at triage point right now with a lot of the stuff that we're doing. Our properties are heavily used, you know, and there's just things have been deferred. And, you know, if I have one guy out, basically there's one guy left to, I mean, and you know, I send him on garbage run. You know, it's just, even in that situation, you know, if I have one person who's out, the other person, you know, I have them do work around the shop, make signs, things like that, but I can't send them up to Brett Woods to cut a tree with one person, you know. Historically, the department, and I know every department is running lean, but when we cut this out 2 years ago, it was basically understanding that, hey, listen, times are tough, cut it out, we'll see when we can replace it. I've basically done that for 2 years. It's created some issues internally, but we've worked through them, and you know what? It basically came back to me and said, you know, there might be an opportunity to have this position back. Again, I offered it at a lower pay grade. I need a laborer. I'm not saying I need a crewman too, or, you know, that. We're trying to get younger blood into the department to start teaching them to kind of rise up through the ranks. You know, the Tidegate situation and that type of infrastructure is not something I can just teach someone, a seasonal staff,
sense. I mean,
and
that
then
part
say,
makes sense.
hey, you know what? You know, we have the whole beach neighborhood that relies on this. Go shut those gates, and you know, I hope everything will be all right.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
So, quick question. I don't know if it was a couple weeks ago or a month ago, whatever. We bought, or we passed a resolution to buy a piece of land that was, you know, brought forward by the Land Acquisition Committee, and that is 100% conservation cleared and maintained. Are we buying land that can't be maintained on the current staff?
No. I mean, is that, no, because I will say, some parcels require more maintenance than others. So the parcel that we bought is going to be passively maintained, meaning I'll have to mow it a couple times a year, which I can do internally. But the level of maintenance for Lake Mohegan, as opposed to the parcel that we just purchased, is night and day. You know, so...
But there's walking, you know, whenever I hear walking paths, which this thing did say, right, it implies to me a certain amount of maintenance, that it's safe and, you know, people don't fall over and break their leg, you know, those kind of things. And I get it, Lake Mohegan is pretty intricate, right? But
No,
any
I
of
mean,
these
it's
things we
managed
buy
passively.
is an updated, or it's an increased workload for you, truthfully, right?
There's more work, but it's not, so rather than, you know, it's not something that's mowed on a weekly basis or it's going to cause a big budget impact. You know, at the end of the season, you know, we borrow Public Works flail mower and we go out and mow all of the large open space areas. Hoyden's Hill, Lake Mohegan, North Cedar, or Cedar Road, all of the Pine Creek area. So this is something we would mow in, you know, in the spring and the fall. And, you know, it's just another couple hours to the schedule that, you know, at that time of the year, you know, things are starting to go, you know, it's not as high of a labor period of the year. You know, once summer's really over, you know, October, November is when we do all the mowing, things are kind of calming down. So, no, that will not be an increased workload. I look at those things before we buy a piece of
Well,
property.
I mean, I would assume so much, right?
Yeah.
But- Thanks.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll go to the Shellfish Commission.
We got to get Jim, right?
Oh, yeah, could we? Well, do we want to take a vote as to whether we want to back? No. I was just about to call the question, Jim.
One question that's selfish, I don't want him here.
I had a feeling the way it was going to go, though, so. All right. Shellfish. Go right ahead, bro.
Yeah, so it's a zero budget increase. We just, if you look at the past, you know, all the line items were just $100, $200, $300, $400. We just put them into one line item. It's easier to manage that way for issuing purchase orders, or the bulk of the budget goes to the clam clinic and then reseating the beds. They're talking about possibly getting a seasonal intern just for the labor line item because they do have a bunch of active programs going on right now. And they're all volunteers, and they were looking for maybe someone from the aquaculture school in Bridgeport that could help them with a little bit of the heavy lifting.
Thank you. Any other questions on the Shellfish? Seeing none, thanks once again.
Thank you.
We'll go to miscellaneous contingency. Mr. Mayor, this is going from, well, it's staying flat with prior year. Why did we raise it prior year from 12.9 to 30,000? Do you remember?
That's not.
Those were actual.
That's actual. No, yeah. And the actual year-to-date is about 10. You know, this
So is 30
I think
too
it
much,
was,
is it?
yeah, I think it was 45. We reduced it to 32.
It was budgeted at 25.
Can we get some history on this, just so we can see where it's coming out, please? Go back a few years. Does anybody else have any questions on this one?
When do we hire the appraiser and things like that? Not till 2020? I mean, the town, you know.
There's
Excellent question.
Well, the assessor's on tonight, so
Yeah.
you can ask him those questions.
No, the only reason I'm asking is that sometimes we put in those things, some of the court fees and things like
Right,
that. But
that's
that's
what
probably
goes
a
in.
year or
Court-
two away? Couple years
Yeah,
away?
that's a year or two away.
Okay, okay.
But blight goes in here.
Yeah.
You know, we just stuff that we don't know what to do with that we need to deal with goes in here.
Okay.
We try to minimize it. I mean, I could beef it up, but we try to identify a correct place or a reasonable place, a connected place. It's just when I have nowhere to go, goes
Yeah.
here.
No, I understand. Thank you.
All right, anybody else on miscellaneous contingency? Can we get that history of that?
Bob, you know of nothing coming up that you would want to increase it, just in general? Okay, thanks. Okay.
Page 87, Community and Economic Development. Hello there, Mr. Barnhart.
Good evening.
Hello. Hey, how are you?
Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development.
Talk to us about your budget, Mr. Barnhart.
So, there's not much to talk about other than the one line, which obviously is the bulk of the increase. The majority of that, it's we're asking for a $40,000 increase over the current year. The bulk of that is to fund each of the 5 towns as a part of the Fairfield County 5 have been asked to set aside $30,000 for regional marketing and business recruitment campaign. Our hope is that we might be able to leverage that with some additional dollars from the state, and in fact there's a bill pending for which the First Selectman and others provided testimony in support of that, a pilot program to market Fairfield County as a business location. We've been doing that on our own. We're committed to doing that, continuing to do that, but obviously with some additional resources from both the state or private sources that we could do a lot more. In fact, looking around at how some other counties or regions handle this, it's usually a public-private initiative done at the county or regional level. So again, that's the majority of it, but there's also within that foundational support for our Buy Local campaign, from some marketing collateral materials associated with that, as well as our tourism and community marketing campaign We hope to be doing a website update to our Experience Fairfield site either later this fiscal year, probably the bulk of it next fiscal year. We maintain 2 websites in addition to the town's website, our community economic development page. One is devoted to marketing to businesses for our business recruitment program, and the second is, as I mentioned, our tourism lifestyle brand, Experience Fairfield. With respect to the Choose Fairfield site, since we launched, we've been doing an outbound marketing campaign. We've got getting good initial results from it. There's really 2 objectives associated with that. One is to shape and reinforce positive attitudes or impressions of the town of Fairfield as a good place to invest or locate your business, and the second is obviously to generate leads. The first is a little harder to track, but obviously important. The second is easier to track, but more difficult to actually move the needle. So that's why it's really important, I think, to do this at scale. So I think that the efforts that we've made to date in terms of working with our counterparts in other towns within Fairfield County make sense to me, because that's really the scale we need to be operating at to compete effectively.
Questions? Mrs. Marmion, then I'll go to Mr. DeWitt, then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
So it's great news about the grand list going up 1%. What do you attribute that? I mean, how do you attribute many of your, I know it's hard to quantify, but your efforts in your department and that contribution in terms of some of these efforts that are underway with the Fairfield 5, et cetera, because we talked about the Sturgis Ridge and maybe the other assisted living, I can't remember the name of it, and then the new one coming in that might have contributed. But I don't know, can you draw a line between your department's efforts and what's contributing to our grand list?
It has an effect, but there are a lot of variables as you put your finger on it. There are a lot of things that are obviously outside of our control, a lot of macroeconomic forces at play. You know, one of the issues that we run into is the state's not creating new jobs, a lot of new private sector jobs. We haven't seen a lot of new job growth. Businesses are operating on a much smaller footprint than what they historically have been doing. There's still a lot of office space available in Lower Fairfield County. Vacancy rates are still in the 25% range in the Central Business District in Stanford, Lower Fairfield County. We do a lot better than that here, but it's a factor it's a reflection of the fact that we have a very small office market compared to some of our neighbors. You know, it obviously does help, and I think there is, Fairfield has a strong brand in the marketplace. It's reflected in the fact that, again, we're certainly using to our advantage the fact that the Yankee Institute for Public Policy rated the town as a great place to do business, the #1 in the state. There are a lot of variables in that ranking, but I'm not going to quibble with it. I'm certainly going to use it to our advantage to market the town, and we're using it in our marketing campaign currently. So these efforts will continue, but again, I think in terms of grand list growth, it all boils down to getting projects approved and into the pipeline, into construction, because that's really, you know, there's obviously some change with when you put businesses moving in with personal property, but that doesn't tend to move the numbers very much. It's really construction projects that increase the grand list. So the good news is that there are a number of other projects in the pipeline that those, as they come to fruition, should continue to show grand list growth. But again, it takes a lot. You know, it takes $100+ million in increased valuation to move the grand list 1%. The fact that we almost achieved that mark this past year, that was the largest year-over-year increase in a decade. So there are a lot of projects that contributed to that. I'd like to think we had some small part to play, but there are a lot of other variables that do have that effect, you know, do have impact on that.
We'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you. So a couple questions. So the first selectman bumped up this line item by $10,000.
He did.
Since he's not here, Could you tell me why you think he did that, or if
Uh,
you know why he did it?
He did it because there was a commitment amongst the five mayors and first selectmen of the Fairfield County Five to each put in $30,000. So initially, I did not have that in my budget, so he bumped it up to reflect that commitment.
Okay. You mentioned the website before. How much attributable revenue can we say has been brought in by the website? Either the County Five, or was it or the economic?
I would have a very hard time quantifying that. I think that's just, you've in past appearances before the board, there was conversation about the need to do more in terms of marketing the community, and we've certainly responded to that. But as I said then, I'll say it today, it's very hard to quantify those impacts. Again, in terms of, if I was, one of the things I mentioned in terms of an overall goal is to shape public perception or business attitudes as to the town. I think the town does have a good reputation. If you talk to businesses, developers, realtors, it has a good brand. Are there things we can do to improve on it? Absolutely. But part of the goal of a campaign is to hopefully improve upon that. And the best way to measure that would be to do some kind of market research up front, and then at the end of the campaign, and measure whether or not you've shifted people's attitudes. That's a little bit beyond what we have the resources for. So we're kind of doing this based on what is acknowledged best practices, but I'd have a very hard time quantifying, that.
Yeah,
for
and
you.
I do marketing, and I would agree with you that it's hard to, right. So I want to talk about the Fairfield County Five, because every time I get an email, hey, there's an update, I go look, and I spent a little time looking at the Fairfield County Five, and it's a little confusing to me. You just made a statement, we have a small office market compared to our neighbors. So I have a hard time understanding why we would all, let's just say Fairfield, would combine resources with 4 other communities, come to Fairfield County, and then when Amazon says, oh, Fairfield County sounds good, does it become a 5-way food fight? Who in Fairfield County is going to get in the Fairfield 5? Who's going to get that business? It seems counterintuitive to me that we would be like in.
Well,
it's not if it's not a state initiative. A couple years, New York was like, come to New York, get a 10% tax reduction off your business. That was a state thing. This is a county thing. So
you're right. There is competition, obviously, amongst and between us. We receive the bulk of our revenues through property taxes. As we just talked about, the only way to really increase the grand list is to encourage new construction, new investment activity.
Agreed.
And so there is that. I think typically, as we've found, because we've done some outbound marketing to small to medium-sized companies based in New York and the 5 boroughs in Westchester County, I think it's a bit of a reach for us to try to recruit out-of-state companies to move directly from New York or the 5 boroughs or Westchester County to Fairfield.
I would agree with you.
Now, we did that. We did this. There's a lot of stops in between that provide the same advantages, but plus the advantage of being.
So you're going right where I'm going. Isn't Greenwich in the Fairfield County 5?
Yes, absolutely.
So
but
those companies are going to Greenwich more than they're coming here.
Let me finish. I think we discovered, we learned some things through that process. We didn't spend a whole lot of money on it, but to answer your initial question in terms of why Fairfield County 5, really, as we're competing against Northern New Jersey, Westchester, Dutchess County, we're competing against counties. And we don't have that in Fairfield. So to the extent to which we're going to try to attract investment into the state from out-of-state sources, it makes sense to me for us to pool our resources and work together. Once they're invested, once they're interested in Fairfield County, then to some degree, it's every man for himself in terms of providing the best possible pitch.
Yeah.
Now,
Is there any agreement there?
No, but I think we work. There isn't, but I know my market here, and I know what what we can do and what we can't do in terms of accommodating new business growth. And I'm the first to acknowledge if there's a company that's interested in the state of Connecticut, in Fairfield County in particular, and if I can't accommodate them here, I'd rather them go to Bridgeport or Trumbull or Westport or Stamford than some other place out of state. I've had that happen. We'll make our best possible pitch, but at the end of the day, I think it comes back to us when we do what's in the best interest of the client, the customer, and they'll remember that they had a good, favorable outcome here. If I can I want to sell them here. But if I can't, I want them to go someplace nearby. And hopefully that'll come back to us. But
How would that come back to you?
Well,
Mark?
the beginning, what I would say with regard to the Fairfield County 5 is, to me, until we start creating new jobs in the state of Connecticut, see private sector job growth more robust than what we have seen over the last several decades, and until we start filling up the vacant office space that's already been created, lower Fairfield County, it's hard for me to see new office construction in this part of the state. There might be select users that are probably more likely than not moving from more costly environments, lower Fairfield County, and saying, well, I have a plot of land someplace and it's going to lower my operating costs. We don't have that argument vis-a-vis a Shelton. So it's really, what we have to sell is if there's a plot of land that that guy really, really wants to be in because it has certain advantages based on where his workforce or where the CEO is located, then we're in the game. But otherwise, we're not very much in the game. So to me, all my leads generally come from, and this is why we started this campaign. I said, sure, let's give it a shot. Let's go talk to New York companies. But I know, based on my experience for the last 15 years, my qualified leads come from Stamford and Norwalk. They come from closer in. And so to the extent to which Stamford is successful, it's a little bit of the trickle-down theory to some degree. I was happy that New York was going to get Amazon because there's a potential they were going to displace a lot of companies in New York.
Agree.
And they were going to move someplace. And I was hoping that Fairfield County would get its share of them. But Westchester and Northern New Jersey in the game too. So, and they're bombarding the airwaves with stuff all the time. So we got to be at this level. And we can't, even $80,000, that's nothing. I'm getting ads, pop-up ads on my browser because I'm doing my own little market research. Greater Rochester, Dutchess County, they're popping up all the time. Those campaigns cost several $100,000. And it's a regional campaign. It's a public-private initiative. It's chambers of commerce, business alliances working with government at both the state and county levels that are doing this. We need to be doing the same thing. And that's what the promise of Fairfield County 5. We're going to start with 5 because there seems to be at least some acknowledgement that we can kind of work together. But there is going to be competition, no question about it.
Yeah.
Who are the 5 again?
It's Greenwich, Stamford, Norwalk, Westport, and us. And, you know, of those 5, 3 have economic development professionals, Stamford, Norwalk, and us. And then Westport and Greenwich are primarily volunteer-based, or the economic development activities are function out of the First Selectman's office. But, you know, there is, at least, you know, I'm optimistic because the group has been working together, not as fast as I would like. And one of the things I think we definitely need to do, if we're going to operate as a region, you have to have a digital presence. And a page on the Stamford website doesn't qualify. So we need a digital presence, and then we need to create a marketing campaign around it, which is kind of what we're doing at a smaller level. But that's where I'm happy to share our list with the rest of the group, because I think they'll be successful and we'll be successful as a result. So,
Thank you. Any other questions on this? We'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Hey, Mark. Has the vacancy rate for businesses, office space, whatever, commercial property, what has it changed in the last 12 months since you were last year?
it hasn't changed a lot. We're around, we go anywhere from 9% to 12 or 13%. locally in the Fairfield market. And again, I'd love to take full credit for that, but again, it's because we have a fairly small office market, and it mostly appeals to smaller office users.
Okay. Do you know where we are right now with that? Are we at the 9% or are we at the 12%?
We're a little over, we're in the low teens. Yeah, we're going to run, we usually do a quarterly report. We're due for one April 1. I usually check the numbers then.
Could you share that with the Board of Finance?
Sure.
Thank you. Can you tell me what the successes in Fairfield have been from the Fairfield County 5? Are there any?
Within the town?
Yeah.
I can't point a finger at one, no.
Has there been any successes in Fairfield County with the other towns from the Fairfield County 5?
I don't know of, can I say there's a specific company that as a result of our business outreach efforts to date have moved? I can't name one, no.
Okay.
Then, again, I will say that we haven't, we've only.
How new are you? That was my question.
Well, we've done
related to that.
We've done a couple of outreach efforts in the city, and that was helpful in terms of developing a messaging strategy.
Branding.
But there wasn't. It's not a campaign. We really need to put some resources and muscle behind this and do something on a sustained level, and we're not there yet. So.
I'm just trying to get a baseline because.
No, I agree. We haven't.
Because you're asking for, $40,000.
Well, the baseline's there.
No, I'm just trying to get a baseline as we go another year and another year after that, and just to get some sense.
Need to measure.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I can't come back here every year and give you $40,000 and nothing. At some point, it's going to come to an end.
And by the way, we got to know who's giving what from the different towns, because if other towns
I'm just trying to get a baseline.
Success,
it's not and you've been doing this Fairfield County 5 for about a year.
Yeah, a little over a year.
A little over a year. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Can you give us your yearly Metro Center status report? Because to me, once again, that's the sole property that stands out for economic development that we've been promised. And I'm sure we could all add up the cost of where we thought we'd be, what we were kind of sold when we all approved that, and what the bond is for all that work is costing us every single year that the taxpayers of this town are paying. And it's now, what, 10 years down the line? 12?
I would say the origins of that are much longer than that.
When was it done? When was like the
we opened the
station?
Opened the station, I think, 2011.
2011. So to me, that's at least we had something going there. We had something to deliver.
Well,
all the infrastructure
we
was
had the
done.
misfortune of delivering the station, not
bad
exactly in a that too, but we weren't exactly in a strong economic state at that time.
We've been doing pretty well economically.
But I would say this: that's not the only site that we have that's a prime development site, obviously, that we focus on. So there's
it's
progress,
a fairly large
but it is large.
It's something
there's nothing.
This town invested a lot of money in infrastructure, and
Legal
we
costs.
have the whole place is wide open, right at a train station. I don't know whether there's another place ready to go like that spot in Fairfield County that has the access to the train station.
It is
ready to build.
I think of it, although it does have its challenges from a development standpoint, not of our making. Not that we didn't come up with the overall development plan for that site, but certainly the folks that are now taking the lead in terms of developing that property are having to wrestle with some of those issues in terms of topography and where the road is vis-a-vis, and the fact that it relied upon a lot of structured parking that is expensive to build. They're at a point where they're making an application, you probably know, to inland wetlands, and I believe that process is still, they haven't been fully through the public hearing. From there, they would obviously then make an application to planning and zoning. That said, there has been development in that vicinity and investment activity in the vicinity. So I do think it was a good investment by the town. Obviously, I would have preferred that we didn't have didn't take responsibility for remediating a brownfield site when we didn't clearly understand what we were getting into and have the attendant costs with it, but
I would say,
point,
I mean,
it's-
personally, Mark, I'd say it really wasn't a good investment for the town. I mean, I was on the RTM, and then I was on the Board of Selectmen for a little bit with this for some of the problems and the suits and stuff that came up, but you look back on that money that we put in there and what we were sold and what we were told we were going to make an economic development.
I think
And
I think the
I-
jury's
I don't-
I think the
I don't-
jury's still out. I think you're seeing the development in that activity, which has a substantial positive effect on the town's grand list.
And everybody can go back and forth on whether it was good or bad. I mean, it's 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and I'm not discounting. What I'd like to know is what's going on, right? And what you're saying is
They're in the process of making an application to the land use boards.
Does that include a change of use?
They will need some changes or amendments to the existing regulations to accommodate at least what they've indicated is part of their plan.
Which is what, some residential?
They're definitely including residential as part of their overall development mix.
There we go. So how much residential?
300 units of residential.
That children
That's
can be in?
huge.
Yeah, it's a factor of, I'm sure that there may be some school-age children, but typically what we've seen in other developments of this kind, we don't see a lot of school-age children. We don't see
I'm
it
not
at
sure what the
Trademark.
development is, to be honest with you, so I don't know how many bedrooms and things like
Well,
that are.
that's a good point, because it really depends on what type of housing you build. If you're building studio, one-bedroom, even two-bedroom apartments, you generally don't see a lot of school-age children with it. They just don't. We got 80% of the town that's single-family detached.
I mean, the worst
It's
thing-
perfect for people with kids.
The worst thing would be to have some type of development that attracts families that would cause us to have to build, on top of the other money that we invested, $30 million in a brand-new school.
Well, I wouldn't want to see a single-family subdivision there, that's for sure.
It's essentially, I mean, Mr. Walsh, to your point is, and this goes back to your earlier point, it changes the whole economic model for that site.
Yes.
And at present, we don't know what that economic model looks like anymore versus what
Things have changed.
we were sold
So
12 years
different.
ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Things
Or
have changed
20
so
years
much.
ago.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody else?
We don't want a Metro Center elementary school.
Another question.
That's what we're trying to say here.
I certainly don't want
I
to
don't
name
wanna-
it that, yes.
I don't
agree.
want one.
Maybe a preschool, but not a.
I would like a bathroom there, because then I can stop hearing about it, but.
I would like a bathroom there, too.
Yeah.
I raised a question last year, and it really didn't go anyplace, and I know I've not heard of any new movement on this. Is at what point, in order to protect our investment and to try to make money off of this thing and to have something really, really happen, if this doesn't pass, this little mixed-use thing, does the town actually partner with the developer to hire someone who has experience in this, someone from across the country to come in and really market this? Like, you come to the Board of Finance and ask for $200,000 from somebody who's incentivized to actually really market this and gives like a bonus situation if they find a company to come in there, where there's people like that out there. That's what they do.
There's certainly people we can hire that will market and take your money to market the site.
Mhm.
I don't see the economic case to be made here that's going to result in 1 million square feet or 500,000 square feet of office being constructed on that site.
It's going to take a specific company. You're going to have to, like, somebody who nationwide is going to know needs of companies. and
I
know
hope
it
you
and
have,
be able to sell it
if that
to
were
a
the
specific
case, I
company.
hope you
Not
would
sitting
have
here
a
with marketing
clawback
materials.
provision, because
Yeah.
I seriously doubt you're going to be able to overcome the economic fundamentals here.
Yeah.
There's
And-
got to be an employer.
Yeah.
And, employers do need places for their workers to live.
Mhm.
So part of our marketing campaign to these companies is we have several hundred units of new housing under construction.
Mhm.
If you look at marketing campaigns elsewhere, they're advertising the fact they have housing near transit nodes and it's available for people that are working in these companies. So there's the whole live, work, play concept that's going out there. So it is an important component. I do agree with you that I don't want housing constructed such that it would create a lot of burden for our educational system any more than you do. But I do think it is a function of form, function of what type of housing we build that will impact that decision. And if you build the right type of housing, it can be a positive tax rateable to the town, as we've seen. You know, Trademark is adding, you know, $18 million in assessed value to the grand list. It's a $500,000, you know, every year we get a $500,000 from that. There are not very many kids in that. We know, because we get the census
I don't know what's
numbers.
in that building right now in terms of, I don't know what their
They're at
occupancy rate.
95%. They're building another one.
Good.
So, and that's going to be another positive tax rateable. So if you look down the line, because you know, I'm compared to, well, look at all the construction going on in Stanford, Noah. That's what's being built. Now, hopefully the jobs are going to follow. And we're going to get some of that office space filled up, because that's what we need. But there are other ways to grow our commercial grand list. You know, apartment buildings count as commercial property. So, and assisted living facilities. So, you know, thank God we have some of those, because it helps fill the hole that GE left.
Any other?
Thank you. Well, congratulations on the ranking and your contribution to it. Obviously, it's a team effort.
Good news, right.
It is good news. So when you talked earlier about the difference between, you know, you can or you can't accommodate commercial interest, is that a combination of, say, they're looking for existing brick and mortar that doesn't fit their needs, or is that a zoning issue, potentially?
There are times, you know, I'm actually working with a small business owner this week to deal with a zoning question. But that's not typically the issue. The issue is there's typically a mismatch between the company's needs and what's available. And sometimes it's a timing question, or sometimes that space simply doesn't exist. I was trying to get a company that was interested in the market. They were based in Norwalk. It was a big user. It's going to take 15,000 square feet, but they had a very specific need in terms of the office space they were looking for, and unfortunately that space doesn't exist here. Or if it does, it's fully occupied. So, you know, I went through the inventory, talked to a couple of property owners to see if we could accommodate it, certainly talked to the owner of the business, their broker, but in the end, you know, we just couldn't accommodate. They had a very specific request, and that happens often. It's more often the case when we can't accommodate a business need. It's more often that they have a need that we can't fulfill. And there was this crazy period a couple of years ago where we had all of a sudden I had manufacturing, you know, people looking for manufacturing space in town. Well, they want manufacturing space at $8-9 a square foot, which is typical.
Sure.
That doesn't really exist in town, because the underlying value of the land is such that, you know, we've already priced that out unless you control the space yourself. So there's a couple places, but if they don't work, you know, I can show them listing after listing for Bridgeport, Trumbull, Stratford, $8 a square foot. I would love to have them here, but I'd rather have, you know, if I can't get them here, I'm going to put them over there as opposed to leaving the state. So that's kind of how it works. But there are
Metro Center.
Yeah. What's that?
We got Metro Center.
They don't want $8 a square foot. They want 40.
Well, they're getting zero for a long time.
Well, I try that argument too. You know, half of a pie is better than no pie, right? But you'd be surprised the number of property owners that are saying, well, you know, the deal is right around the corner. I'm going to hold out. I'm going to keep holding out, and that space sits vacant.
Have they met our friends in Hartford?
What's
Mary, Mrs. Leclerc.
I just want to say is the way I view the Metro Center property is our chance to replace GE, and that's what we really should be looking for, is some kind of corporate headquarters or something. That's our best chance to grow the grand list. But I also wanted to ask about the Exide property and the yearly status on that.
Well, the good news is I just got a letter from the DEP indicating the groundwater monitoring report has been accepted and there are no further groundwater monitoring that's required. The bad news is that there's another report after that that the company has to provide to the regulators, which is due later this year. I talked to the attorney that represents Vail Inco every month. He's been very, very good to work with. I send him, because I do get inquiries in terms of leads for the space, even though they have an option agreement, so I send them up to him. But they're looking probably towards the latter part of this year, early next, in terms of the sale disposition of the property. And I've talked to the folks that have the option on the property, but they've been playing their cards pretty close to the vest. But that was the whole, so part of my thought process with the TOD planning study, including the downtown, was to try to foster a dialogue between the developer and the town outside of the regulatory process as to what that site should look like, because it's obviously going to get rezoned from industrial. But, you know, for whatever reason, well, they told me what the reason is, but they didn't really want to engage. So we did have some conversation about it, but, you know, I think everyone benefits when you have some clear, you set some clear expectations up front. This is what the town would like to see, the community wants, and, you know, the developer understands that. It's very transparent up front. They don't waste a lot of time and energy doing that. We might still be playing a little bit of a dance come next year with regard to land use approvals on that site.
Mr. Brown.
Do you and your counterparts talk to Hartford, let them know how hard it is to attract businesses into this state?
Yes.
And are they aware that we're the third largest outbound state in the country?
I think they are, yes.
And what do they say? Do they talk about what they're going to do to change?
Well, you know, we have a new administration, a new commissioner designee. I remain hopeful. We have had meetings with that, the administration, the team up there. We'll continue to make our case. But the proof's going to be in the pudding. We have to change course here, because and part of it is, as we've talked about with the marketing piece, it's, you know, having somebody at the state that's going to push back on this narrative that's taken hold. I mean, it's not all gloom and doom. We can do a good enough job talking about all the flaws we have, but there's a lot of good things in Connecticut. But at some point, somebody at the state has to be pushing back against this narrative and then enacting policies that support it too. So
Yeah, I agree there are a lot of good things with this state, but the fact is, I don't think there's too many companies across the country that are saying, you know what, I think we ought to move our corporate headquarters to Connecticut. And that's not just a narrative, that's just a fact. You go to different seminars, conferences, and they'll tell you, look, California, Connecticut, even Massachusetts, it's tough.
yeah, I don't, you know, from my perspective, you know, the state strategy should not be necessarily focused on trying to lure a company from Atlanta, Georgia to come to the Northeast. It's really, our best prospects are right next door.
Yeah.
New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, you know, that area, it's one of the only places you can actually argue that we have a lower cost of living, lower tax structure than the adjoining state. You know, we actually have a cost competitive advantage. So, you know, we got to be, I don't understand why, frankly, the state's not doing more in that regard. That was part of the reason that Fairfield County 5 kind of crystallized.
You know, really my point is, if you're doing that and you guys are coming together and going to Hartford and making the case of what your challenges are, what you're hearing through your marketing efforts, I think that would be a good use of all of your time.
We do, Jim, the follow-up, I think you raised a very valid point. Part of the issue is a lot of people are spending a lot of time, and not you, I'm not talking about our efforts, your efforts. A lot of people are doing a lot of times talking about marketing. You actually need a viable product to sell, right? And while there's a lot of good things about the state of Connecticut, you have Warren Buffett out there saying right now it's not a viable product, right? You have, in terms of the state, in terms of alluring new business, right? You're talking about, hey, we should be grabbing businesses from surrounding states, right? We can't even keep the businesses we have.
Well, it does start here. I think
Yeah.
there's an old, the basic formula is 70% of your business comes from your existing customer base. So, we need to focus on the business. We spent a lot of time talking about marketing and external clients, but the bulk of my time is spent still talking to existing businesses here in
They
Fairfield.
call it renewable business, right?
Right.
You're exactly right. All right, any other questions? I want to move this along.
It's more a comment because we're talking so much about marketing, and it's a Herculean task for you, I know, with your staff, and you need to do the marketing, but you have limited resources, and we have, I know you have interns and everything else, but we have two fabulous, institutions of higher ed here with people who are studying communications and marketing, at both the undergrad and graduate level. So I would hope that this Fairfield would be seen as a great project for, the business schools or the communications marketing. It's just we've got them here, and, kind of a pro bono, project for them that would be phenomenal.
We have tried. We will continue.
Thanks. All right, I want to move along on this.
Mark, just the Amazon loss to New York, you said you were hoping you'd shake something loose, common thing. So are you basically saying AOC caused some economic development problems here?
Just kidding.
I had to let that one go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Barnhart. All right. The next budget, Harbor Management Commission. Thank you for your patience, especially since you've got a flat budget year over year. You're down $50.
Happy to be here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. What are you going to do without that $50?
Can you loan it to Mark?
We're going to try to complete our dredging projects. That's our main long-term challenge.
Is the dredging project?
Yeah, we have a permit in place, which we've had for several years, to complete some improvements at the yacht yard, making the launching ramp and the dinghy dock usable at low tide. We have a state grant in place to pay for it, and we've had continuing problems getting the necessary disposal permits. We even have a dredger. Well, it's a very long story, but originally the project required capping material because the material that was supposed to be dredged was thought to be contaminated, and we weren't able to do the project the dredging has to be done basically between October and April because of the shellfish implications and the ongoing boating season and so on. So originally the plan was to dredge the material and dispose of it in the site off of New Haven, but it would have needed capping material, and there was no other project in the area that would accommodate that. And so the fallback plan was to get the permit revised so that it didn't need the capping material, and we'd be able to use the disposal area off of, well, in the western sound. The problem with that is that New York State has had a ongoing dispute over allowing anything to be disposed of there. So at any rate, we're working to be able to finally complete that project and hope to have it done next fall. The longer term project issue has to do with the sandbar that's developing at the mouth of the harbor, and getting the necessary permits and working with the Corps of Engineers to get that project done.
Any other questions from anybody? Seeing none, thank you, sir, and my apologies for the
Okay.
lateness of the evening.
Well, it's about an hour earlier than it usually is, so.
There you go.
Thank you.
You got to admire our consistency.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to call for a 5-minute break, and then we'll get back and we'll finish up the rest of these items. There's one item that we're going to push this evening to my fellow board members, and that is the fund balance discussion. We've had a late-breaking request for new information related to the fund balance, given some decisions made by the Board of Selectmen. And so we're going to put it on another night, okay? So, Mr. DeWitt, if you could look at an appropriate night, work with Mr. Mayor, and we'll just move that to another
Just a matter
night.
of figuring out when we get the date, and then we can.
Yeah.
I think the only night we wouldn't put it on is Board of Ed.
Can you share with us what the request was for, so that we kind of understand what's
Absolutely,
coming?
without a question. What happened was, the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Mayor provided additional information to the Board of Selectmen on how he calculated the contribution to surplus, taking into account some of his thoughts on what was going on this year. We've never done that before. So he estimated, oh, we'll probably add this much till next year, or at the end of this year, this will bring us up to this level, and therefore we can drop this down. So we've asked to see that calculation. We've also asked to see some of the history of what's going on with other towns relative to their percentages and the total dollar amount that's in their reserves right now, to put this in context, because the thought being, are we violating our own policy if we were to prove this going forward? And right now, we're not at that 11% marker that we put. We're a shade below it, right? Now, Mr. Mayor is saying, if all things remain equal, by the end of this fiscal year, we might be above the 11%. Right. Okay, but we're not there right now, right? So I started to get, once the Board of Selectmen made their decisions, I started to get bombarded with requests for additional information, which I forwarded along to Mr. Mayor, and he basically has come back and said, I can't provide all this tonight, so we really can't have a full discussion. Make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. We're going to take these out of order right now. We'll start with purchasing. Then we'll go to assessor, and then we'll go to tax collector, and then we'll finish off the rest. As I said, we're going to move fund balance. I'm going to ask Mr. DeWitt and Mr. Mayor to get together and come back with their recommendation on that, based on when Mr. Mayor says he can have the information available. So let's go to purchasing. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
And we're on page 145 for the purchasing department. And let's see what's going on here. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Thanks for being here.
One quick comment on the salaries.
Yep.
The actual salaries year to year, this budget year versus current year, it's a minus 1.2% because of the expected lower salary for a replacement person for Phil Ryan.
Got it. Thank you very much. Do we have questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Are there any real changes here? I mean, postage is a change, fine. Mr. Mitchell.
$1,000.
Part-time payroll? What do we, yeah.
That's the question I asked.
Yeah.
So, right now, I have a very small staff. It's myself, and right now I have one vacancy, which I'm looking to fill, but there's myself, and then I have, yes, oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so I have I'm the director, and so I have one senior buyer, and I'm looking to hire a junior buyer. So what I'd like to have is I really have no administrative staff, so I'm looking for part-time basically to fill administrative functions. I think it'd be a little bit more productive. Right now, I do a lot of my own stuff. I have the other people do theirs, so I'd like to have an administrative person to help. And unfortunately, I grabbed I have a whole list of the things, but I picked the wrong folder, but I can make it available so you guys can see some of the things.
Can you send that to us, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none?
Bob's trying to.
Oh, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, the only comment I'd make is that Mr. Foley is in competition with me with hours in the office, and so I think he could use some administrative help too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Foley.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's go to the tax assessor.
He has one more budget,
Oh.
administrative services.
Oh, that is you too. My apologies. Yeah, I always forget about that one. 52. Let's go to 52. Go ahead, let's speak to this one. Thank you, Linda. So that's the hourly rates and the courier service contract? Is that the only increase?
Yes, that's the only one. There's a note on here too. My office has been working with the IT department on the copiers, so I'm going to be providing to finance in the next couple of days a breakdown of the copiers. What we've done is, in this budget, there's 4 copiers that we currently lease. So for the next fiscal year, we're reducing it to 2 copiers. So there'll be a substantial reduction in this number here. And then additionally, with the IT department, we're going to be actually buying some machines. I'm working to consolidate. We have about 30 machines. We had 30 individual leases. I'm looking to consolidate those into a single lease. So I'm looking to do substantial reductions in the copier expense across the whole town.
Great. We look forward to seeing that and budgeting for it. Appreciate it. Anybody else have anything? Yes.
Just as a quick, so the part-time payroll we have for administrative services, I know it's not exactly your junior clerk kind of thing, but could
The
it be?
junior clerk's already in there.
Not junior clerk, but your administrative help?
Those 2 positions are upstairs in the first selectman's office. That's the reception area.
Oh.
There's a morning person and an afternoon person.
Yeah, remember when they were downstairs in the first floor on the right? Yeah, so we eliminated a position up in the first selectman's office and
Yep,
used them
yep.
up there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to page 149, which is the assessor's office. Yeah. Linda, is there a revenue item for here? Thank you, Jim.
Yes, there will be.
Hello. Paige,
Ross Murray, is it on?
nice to meet you. Nice to have you here, Mr. Murray. Everyone, please continue to remind
15, isn't it, Linda?
15 for revenue.
15 for revenue.
Ooh, it's up 93%. A whole $7,000.
Which one's that?
The
whole
revenue.
Oh, the revenue?
Yeah, what's assessor maps and field cards?
Those are just copies. So
And do we-
title searchers and appraisers come in and give copies of field cards or a map.
So why are we,
Yeah, that doesn't look like that should be,
is this double counted?
those are tax credits.
So last year, so Bob, explain this to me. Last year we were at 3,800, now we're up to 7,300. I know it's small dollars, I totally get it. I just want to make sure, are we double counting something here?
I actually just noticed that, excuse me, Mr. Wright. I actually just noticed that when we got to this page, and I don't know if Mr. Ross can speak to that. We have the assessor map and field cards, and we have exempt for totally disabled.
Looks like there was
I don't
never
have
exempt for
that
totally
page.
disabled in the 19 budget.
Yeah.
And that
That's
looks like that
exactly
was
what it
a
is.
zero in the budget.
Yeah, it was budgeted as zero.
But it has a 3-year average.
It does.
So, yeah. so
Looks like it was added back in, which is the reason it looks like 93% increase, right?
Ruh-roh.
There's a lot of other state grants that were zeroed out last year. They're all they're all really zero though, right? Yeah.
Do some, I do some for clients that I, like corporations, but you're talking about workers. No, I could probably get you somebody.
Can you guys just get back on us if it's double counted? I mean, it's $3,500, but I just want to know if it's double
Yeah,
counted.
no,
All right?
it appears as though it's,
Well,
that number should have been in the budget last year, but wasn't, or was somewhere else.
Yeah, so let's get back on that. That's it on revenue for the assessors. Thank you for the contribution. Let's go to page 149 to your budget. So you double counted $3,500 and you want a $100,000 increase in spending.
Oh, yeah. We have a reval coming up, so that's a big chunk of what you receive.
How much is a reval going to cost?
We're looking at probably about $400,000.
So why are we only putting 100,000 in?
The reval will start in the spring of '20, so it'll start towards the end of this budget cycle that you're looking at now.
Right.
So we're estimating about a third of that cost will be in.
In the past, can we go back? That's great. Can we go back, Mr. Mayor, and see how we budgeted this last time we had a reval? Because as I remember, we budgeted half in one year and half in the next year.
Yeah. I
We-
think that's correct.
Yeah.
But I think we used 100, well, it's a different revalve.
Right.
There was a full revalve last time?
I understand.
That included site visits, which you would have to start even earlier.
No, I understand that, but I mean, we had made a decision to break it out over 2 years, and that was kind of the concept. Now it's like, now we're getting into, project accounting, well, we're only going to get this year, and we're going to get this next year, okay? So I want to go back and see how we
Yeah.
did this last time.
Yeah, this is, what the total is going to be, what, 400,000?
Right,
Yeah,
400.
and this, the 100,000 is based upon Mr. Ross's estimate of the amount of work that will be done in the first year.
Right.
All right.
Do we put an RFP out for that?
RFP should go out, in the next month or so.
Okay.
To start working on that shortly.
All right.
All right, let's go back and take a look at how we did it in the past and the discussions related to that. Just because I do recall last time we did this, we made a very specific decision. It was going to be done over a 2-year period, split it in half over the 2 years. Because what we're doing here is we're guaranteeing ourselves a huge increase next year. Right? Because we'll go from 100 to 300 next year. Okay. What other increases do we have here? There's a large increase in IT software. Can you
Right.
talk to that?
Our
please?
current software provider for our CAMA system, which is the computer-aided mass appraisal system that you run the reval on, they have a mandatory upgrade going on. So we have to change to their newer product, and that's a $31,000 upgrade, potentially up to $31,000. So I will probably bid that out, RFP it out to see if there's a better option, cheaper, better, more viable option.
Wow.
There's not a lot of choices in the market for CAMA systems
So
for
they
our size.
just kind of have you.
Yeah.
How often do they
Probably-
do the upgrade?
We're
every 2
currently
years.
on we're
Every
currently
year.
on version 6.5. They have a version 7 out that a lot of towns have never gone to. I've never gone to it. And now they're going to a version 8. They're changing the underlying.
And is that what you have to go to?
What's that?
Is that what you have
Yes,
to go
and
to?
we have to go to 8 or we have to switch vendors.
Switching vendors much more expensive?
Well, well, I don't know. Well, I'm going to do an RFP and explore what's out there and make a
But
decision.
you're not going to save in the first year. It's either you're going to pay them now and maybe.
Right. We're going to pay to stay with the current company, or we're going to pay to go with someone else if it proves to be a better option. Cost and function.
Okay. What else do we have going on? Anything else? There's a large increase in salary. Is this one of those anomalies, Mr. Mayor? You're not increasing staff.
The actual year-over-year salary increase is 3.1%. That's more than the 2% normal, what we would expect based upon the union contracting, because we reclassified one of the clerks in the office to a half clerk, half field person, which should increase our ability to, you could speak better to that, to actually generate more revenue.
We currently have 2 field people, and they are stretched to get through the town and the number of permits that we have going on. So we visit every permit that the building department puts out. or try to. I mean, some of the smaller ones we can't get to. But, you know, new construction, additions, that sort of thing, we're attempting to get to every one of those, regardless of whether it's finished or not. And then when it's finished, we, you know, typically will have to go back out. So there's a lot of field work that needs to get done, and
Is that under the appraiser line? Because what it looks like here is you're swapping out a clerk for an appraiser.
right,
Is that, and that's what we're talking about?
right, yes.
And your view on that is the fact that the appraiser's going to be more revenue generating than the clerical help that's back in the office that is.
That's correct. And we've also, you know, over the years and since I've been here, we've increased the efficiencies in the office, but that's really come to the clerks. You know, you can't, there's not much we can do to increase the efficiency of the field person that's got to go out and look at a house and measure it. But, you know, the processing work that's done inside the office, you know, that's improved. So I'm seeing slack in their work, whereas the others are still just as busy. So it makes sense to upgrade that person, and it's a fairly modest cost for what I think we'll gain out of that.
Yeah, this person will still be doing some administrative work. It's a current employee. It's not, we're not adding an employee. We're just changing the job description.
Got it. Thank you for that. Mr. DeWitt?
Just a quick question. You know, the fact that we're being forced, in essence, to spend $31,000 for a software upgrade, but yet we're still spending $4,000 some odd dollars in mailing. So is there any opportunity to send, I know some of these things you've got to get a piece of paper back, but is there any opportunity maybe to have some email blast to 90% of the community that would respond back and go, yep, I'm good, and then the last 10% is going to want paper?
That's not the nature of what we mail. So the mailings that we do are personal property declarations. We have 2,800 of those go out. We mail out to the seniors every year when it's time to renew. We send reminders. We do income and expense mailings to businesses to gather information on commercial property. So there's not really much we can do. I have moved to online filing on personal property.
So this says you've increased the printing and postage by $4,221. This is for the mailing of sales verification questionnaires and preparation for the reevaluation.
That's what the increase is related to.
Okay.
So we're going to.
So I'll take a $4,000 reduction. Can we at least take some of that and blast that out in email? Is there any online way to do that?
It's not a blanket email that we're going to send out to everybody. This needs to go to the house that sold, or to that person, and I don't have their email address. You know, if somebody buys a house, I don't have a way to contact them other than through mail.
We have no way to solicit these things. I mean, I get I get bills in the mail, paper bills, and they say, "Hey, go online." And you go on the website and you put in your email address, and all of a sudden I'm paying my bill online and getting no more paper. Is there an opportunity to at least think that way?
And we do, but if I'm mailing a sales verification questionnaire, it's one time to that person. I don't need to contact them a second or third time. So I'd still have to somehow contact them to get that email address, and that would probably be via mail. So it's...
Okay.
Well, I guess let me give you an example. On your personal property declaration that you just went to online filing, could there be a box on there where you said, provide your email address? Do you in the future agree to accept service by email? Check the box.
We're working towards that.
Okay.
It's
I mean, 'cause those are a lot of the same ones, right? Every year, many
every
of the
year
same
it's the same businesses,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
that
yeah,
might be a
absolutely
possibility. That might be a
hope to do that.
possibility.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Anybody else?
I think that's what Mr. DeWitt was talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? I got a quick question for him.
Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Mr. Walsh, do you have something specific?
Just two small things, and they're not a lot of money, but anytime something goes up 30% or whatever, I just ask the question, why is the secretarial services all of a sudden going up 30%? I mean, it's $300.
The BAA, you know, we're in BAA time right now.
Okay.
So this is the Board of Assessment Appeals.
Gotcha.
We have 130 appeals this year. We've gotten through not quite half, and we've already spent $500 on secretarial services. It's a slow process.
Okay.
The board takes a bit of time to get through their decisions, and
But there's an appeal period every year, right?
yes.
So wouldn't that be this, Are you saying just because of what you're seeing coming up, or based on what you're seeing, you expect that to apply next year?
Yeah, I mean, we have over 100 appeals every
Okay.
year.
Okay. And then the last question is, why is the travel and meetings going up by a third?
Couple things. We're hoping to train the new person.
Okay.
And
That makes sense.
we're expecting, our training for the assessors is typically once a year at UConn. And they've sold the hotel up there, and we think the cost of that's going to go up, so we're.
No, that makes
gonna
sense if you're
stay
training
there.
the new person. That makes sense. Thanks.
Can I, thank you. Two things. First, as a request, and if you could get it to Mr. Mayor and we could see it, I'd love to see what the results are of these assessment appeals that are happening. So if you've got a report that shows, hey, in the last year, here's what it was on, here's what it is now, this is what's gone on, I would love to see that.
It'll be a couple weeks before they're wrapped up.
Okay, well, do you have an ongoing, like a running report? I don't want to wait till the end, is what I'm saying. I just want to get a flavor for what's going on. This isn't about adjusting the revenue number so much. I just want to see what's going on with the assessment
year's.
appeals. This year's.
Yep.
So if you could flip that to Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Mayor, let's distribute that to the board.
And are you looking for just what?
I want to know
what it was and what it is and the percent change?
I'd love to see what's going on in town, right? We get a lot of anecdotal information here. As I alluded to, you might have been here earlier tonight when I talked about it, right? I'd like to see what some of the facts are, right? And if it's done by section of town broadly, in this section of town, here's what's going on with the appeals. In this section of town, here's what's going on in the appeals. In this section, here's what's, here's what it was, here's what it is, here's the percentage change. I would just love to get that information so we get a flavor for what's going on.
We'll put something together.
Do you have any rough idea of paying attention to what values are in town?
Well,
like just Greenfield Hill. Like
Yeah.
what we're probably going to be in, and I know it's rough and you're not doing the thing, but
Yeah,
This will all be included in that document that Mr. Flynn has asked for that I'll be providing shortly.
Okay.
And I'll just comment, and you have to realize what we'll provide you is based off our 15 reval and the change from the reval. So what's actually happening in the market could be a little different, because if our reval was a little off, it could skew what perception is in the market.
That's fine. I just want to know, you hear all these stories, if you want to highlight some things, that's fine, right? We just need some data. I'd like to see some hard data. And Mrs. Leclerc, she had her hand. She was.
As a follow-up, either, I don't know if you can speak to it tonight, or if you want to also put together the data. Earlier tonight, they talked about the increase in the grand list. Could you put together a list of drivers of what drove that increase, so we have a better understanding of that?
You already have that information.
You have that?
I think
Okay.
You have it.
We
I
did that
have
to the
it.
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, it's in your package.
Oh, okay.
From when? Was that handed out when?
It was one of the emails.
So it was emailed as of when?
Last couple of days?
Well, certainly within the last couple of days, yeah. Everything's gone out the last couple of days.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mrs. Leclerc?
No, so I guess I don't know what's on it, so I'll have to wait on that.
I mean, I can give you the highlights.
Yeah, that's all, really.
We had the benchmark assisted living. That was about a $17 million increase that came online fully. Westway Road, the condo project there, if you sum up the value of those condos, that is almost an $11 million increase. We have the OHI assisted living, which is the one on Mill Hill Terrace. That's under construction. That was a $10 million increase, and that's not 100% complete yet, so that's a partial. And that's the big ones. We had Bronson Meadows, which is the residential property up there. That's ongoing. That added almost $3 million this year, and that is yet to be completed. And then from there on down, it gets to be smaller increases. A couple of apartment complexes. Campfield Drive, the Harbor Townhouses, which is up on Black Rock Turnpike, and then Southport Athletic Club. Those were the top gainers. We also added almost $10 million to the personal property We put on 330 new accounts this year to personal property. Most of those were from, or half of those were from going through the income and expense and comparing their tenant listing to our personal property accounts and looking for new accounts that way, and also reviewing any trade name filings. There's a bunch of duds in there, but we did pick up 167 accounts and close to $3 million in grand list on that. And then Southern Connecticut Gas Company, they went up $8 million.
Right. That's the one that I saw too. Any others?
Did you mention Sturgis Ridge?
I'm sorry?
Sturgis Ridge, is that the one where behind the Carlton convalescent home?
That's complete.
Was that one of the drivers you named?
I think that's Benchmark.
I think that is Butch.
Yeah, the OHI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's BSL, Benchmarked.
It's the other OHI.
It's BSL. It's Benchmark Living.
Okay. Any others? I had one more. Do you have things that you can you drive, how do I want to say this appropriately? Is this staff going to drive getting these done faster so they get on the grand list faster?
Yes.
Okay. Your backlog is how much now?
We probably had a couple of hundred permits that we didn't get onto the grand list. Now, we're not, we do them by value, so we're not talking a tremendous value.
Got it.
And we're looking to add them through the BAA. There's a method to do that, so we'll be adding, quite a few that way. But,
okay.
Yeah, we're scrambling to, throughout the end of the year to wrap it up.
Thank
So
you.
we're hoping this will relieve it.
Mr. Flynn, you made an excellent point, I thought, earlier tonight during the first selectman's, following his presentation. And I just wanted to see, did you hear the first selectman's presentation tonight?
Not all of it.
Okay. And Mr. Flynn made a point about a lot of the work down at the beach. As those houses, new houses get, the old houses get torn down, new houses go on. Those numbers are going right in, correct? Like you're doing a reassessment, and then you're taking a cape for 400 and that you might have on your books for 380, and then one of the builders comes on like they just did next to my house, and now it's a $1.3 million house. How long does that take to get onto your books? So the house is just finished. The realtor put a sign up last week.
We look at properties. We can add properties at 2 points of time. Once we add what's there on October 1st, which is our grand list date. So whatever's existing there, we put it on partial construction. The next time we can add something is either a CO or the property is in use. So if we can see that the property is in use, we can put it on even without a CO. So that's the 2 times. So, and if we put it on with a CO or in use, it's prorated on.
Yep.
For whatever portion of the year is remaining.
Well, and that affects the tax for that year, but the grand list actually goes up.
Right. But what I want, just to correct the terminology, we don't revalue a property when it's CO'd or constructed. We look at that property and say, what would that house that's there now be worth on October 1 of 15?
Yes.
Which is our last reval.
Yes. Right, so you value it.
It's not revalued as of its current value, it's revalued as of October 1st. So everything goes back to October 1st until the next reval is done.
That's correct. Great. Yes. Thank
you.
So I guess Mr. Flynn's point was that, with the exception of it being revaled as of 2015, a lot of the beach area, which has had the biggest expansion in the town in valuation, is kind of baked into our numbers already, except for the change of what the reval might do to those numbers from 2015.
Right. How is the reval reflect what the market's done to values.
Yes.
And really, this is the point of a reval, is to redistribute the tax burden.
Right.
Because if your property has risen in value and you're paying at a lower rate, you're really enjoying a lower tax rate than you should, whereas the Greenfield Hill area is the opposite.
Right.
So that's why we reval, and that's probably why they moved it to 5-year cycle versus the 10 that it used to be.
Right.
Because that was too long of a...
Right, so the specific property gets valued and banked, but the whole area doesn't get revalued until the next revaluation.
Right.
So if you're on a street, and this is just another example, right? If you're on a street down at the beach where it used to be the smaller homes and all that kind of stuff, and that's what your neighborhood was, right? That's what you got valued at 5 years ago. Then, let's say there's 5 houses on that cul-de-sac, and 4 of them are now multi-million-dollar homes. They've all been valued and baked in because they're multi-million. You haven't done anything to your house. You haven't been revalued yet. But because the rest of the neighborhood went up, when you get revalued, you're going to get bumped up because your neighborhood went up.
You're going to
Not
get
by the
bumped up
same amount.
because there's been so much activity of tear downs,
Right.
massive rebuilding, that the small Cape has become basically worthless. It's the land that's driving
exactly.
the value. And
Yeah.
so yes, unfortunately, that house will probably see could see an increase.
Right. Right. Ouch. Yep. Okay.
But those big houses will also see an increase because when they're completed, they're put on at the 15 valuation amount.
Right.
So everybody will get a bump if
Yeah.
it's a bump area.
If to Jim's point, if prices have gone up.
Yeah. In different neighborhoods.
I don't know.
I don't think
for
it's changed
Beach.
that much.
That's what I'm trying to
I
get.
don't think that's
like,
changed that
my comments earlier were based on the fact that we have all of us, I mean, we have friends down in Greenfield Hill that are getting crushed when they go to sell their homes and things like that. And down at the beach, I haven't heard that these people are making a mint, but I don't know. That's all anecdotal, right? You would hope that there's some offset, but I don't know because I haven't seen the data.
If the market's been the same since 15 to current, then maybe the impact each year won't be as bad as maybe some of us are thinking.
No, but then everybody else is going to get whacked harder.
Hill, too.
Because then it gets dispersed. Right. It gets dispersed more. Right.
Hey, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, clarification from my side, I might have made a mistake on, we sent out so many emails lately to the Board of Finance and to the Board of Selectmen. The specific document that, Mary, you were asking about may have only gone out to the Board of Selectmen. So we're going to do 2 things. We're going to send out that document by itself, so you have it. We're also going to forward, they're already online, but we're going to forward all the documents, all the questions that the first selectman's asked. So you'll get all that information as well.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. We're going to go to the tax collector.
Tax collector salary year-over-year actual is 4.5% change. That's because they have one person with a step increase and one person with a longevity.
Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening.
Thanks, and my apologies for the tardiness of the hour.
No problem.
Bless you.
Thank you, everyone. What else do we have here? What else do we need to talk about? Questions, comments, anybody? Is there just a flip here between seasonal payroll and overtime earnings? Is that?
Yes. So I wasn't using the seasonal, and what I found was when I had the staff position cut about a year and a half ago, we've been very behind during collection months, and we're I want to provide a better service to the taxpayers, and that every collection month we're upwards of a week behind in terms of processing mail, and and we're getting inundated with phone calls from taxpayers saying, I mailed my payment 4 days ago, my check hasn't cleared. And we're trying to reduce that by, my logic is, instead of trying to find seasonal payroll, seasonal help that I'm going to only use for, say, 3 or 4 weeks, and within that week and a half of the 3 or 4 weeks I'm trying to train them, I can use my current staff either in the morning before hours or after hours, getting caught up on the mail. Because I'm confident in my staff, they know what they're doing. 4 of my 5 staff are trained, certified through the state, and without having to wait on the taxpayers in person during business hours or answering the phones, they would be able to get a lot of payments processed to reduce that call volume and provide better service to the taxpayers.
Thank you for the explanation. questions from board members? Did you hear Mr. Mayor's latest budget idea is to actually have you delay sending out the bills until such time as they're overdue, and then getting 18%?
Nice.
All right. Mrs. Esmond.
Thank you. So you foresee this as a remedy to losing that position and not having to revisit a new hire?
Yeah, that would be my remedy without refilling it, correct.
Okay. And the advertising line in the budget?
So advertising, that's an easy explanation. We always use the Fairfield Minuteman, and it did go out of publication. But we are required by state statute to do legal notices, and because we're a quarterly town, we have to do this 3 times a quarter, so 12 times a year, and that's the Minuteman's rate. Not the Minuteman, the Citizen. Now that the Minuteman's out of
They're in
publication.
cahoots with the people that do
Buy
our
your competitor,
stuff.
close them down, and then raise your advertising rates because you're the only place in town to advertise. Only in America.
Don't change the statute, just do that.
Happens all the time.
I know.
There is legislation every year because we obviously do the same legal notice on the town website. I do work with the town in terms of getting anyone that signs up for the town alerts. I make sure that the tax collector's legal notice is a part of that as well. So, I'm not stuck in the Stone Age and doing just legal notices in the newspaper. I do that because I'm statutorily required, but I do all the modern technology avenues, and my hope is that there is legislation every year that pushes towards eliminating the newspaper portion.
Yeah, so
but
maybe
we're not
doing
there
like a
yet.
town publication area, like on your website or something, legal notices or something.
Because, we years ago, the purchasing had to put in print every PO, whether it was going to go overseas, which kept us from going, to, less than local sources. And we got that changed. So there's no requirement to place an ad in any physical publication anymore for POs, for purchasing, so.
Yeah, and
Maybe
it
there's
does,
a-
every year it comes up, but the newspaper companies do fight it, so.
Yeah, jeez. There's no more newspaper companies.
I know the governor's put out a proposal to possibly take over personal property of cars at the state level. Isn't that one of his proposals?
Yes, there's actually a hearing tomorrow.
Okay. If that were to happen, I presume they would take over collection of that as well?
Yes, from what I understand.
They would handle the whole thing, right?
That's, yeah.
And then they're going to give you a penny back per car or something like that? I mean, what's the thought process there? They're going to give you some money back, no money back?
I think they would, we're talking 900 million statewide,
Yep.
and they would, I think, disperse it statewide as they see fit. So,
So Bridgeport and Waterbury and those guys would get most of the money.
I have no idea at my level how much Fairfield would be
Yeah.
entitled to, or if we, get anything, but, there are other circumstances where they did do a mill rate cap, where
Okay.
they said the larger cities, if your mill rate is over 32 mills, you tax your cars at 32, and then they would reimburse the difference, and they never did because the money, the state needed the money.
Yep.
So that's why,
Yep.
we have our doubts that.
Yeah. So if that were to happen, how many employees can you get rid of?
I mean, that I'd have to do a study,
Okay.
but
Probably one? At least one? I mean, that seems like a lot of cars to do that work on and collections on.
yeah, I mean, there would definitely be, there possibly be room for something like that, but I'd have to,
Because I
crunch
think
the
there would have to
numbers.
be, I mean, we would not be getting the revenue anymore, so, or potentially not getting the revenue. We'll have to see how that all goes. But something would have to give.
And I wanted to thank you for that, Mr. Walsh. It's a valid point. I did want to see the assessor still here. Part of the analysis that I want to see, actually on the valuation, is where our recent sales prices are for these homes versus what they were valued at in 2015. I want to get a sense of, yeah, and that is included, correct? Okay, great. I just wanted to be clear on that. All right. What else do we have on the tax collector? anybody. All right,
I like the negative numbers, they're great.
there you go. Well, they're great when it's an expense line item.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
when it's
I'm looking
revenue.
at the expense lines.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a good
Much.
evening, and again, apologies for the lateness of the hour.
Oh, no problem.
Let's go to Finance, which is 142, and then we'll go to the Board of Finance, which is 162.
You want to do the revenues?
Yep. Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, you want to do the revenues? I mean, there's really not, the revenues are pretty
Yeah, 16.
consistent, right? I mean, there's,
What's the revenue? Thank you.
I mean, there's a state budget revenue, there's the lease revenue, and rental
Page?
revenue. Page 16.
I reserve the right to come back on these revenue items because it's getting pretty late.
Right, and there's, the revenues are exactly what the governor's budget is.
For what? The general
for the state
education
aid,
grant?
For the state aid, you know, the pilot, the LoSiP, all of those things.
Can you give us,
What the governor's budget is? The one that the governor came out with.
so we included that, but we didn't use that on the,
Yeah, because Mike said that he couldn't get the governor's numbers in the budget on, when we were talking about the other stuff. So how did
Well,
we
no,
get?
we used the original budget, the department budget had last year's amounts.
Oh, last year's amounts.
Okay, and
I thought you
then
meant
we got
what
the
he's proposing.
budget, the governor's budget came out, I don't know, a week or so ago, and those are updated for the Board of Selectmen and are included in the Board of Selectmen adjustments that were made.
Ah, gotcha.
Mr. Mayor, could you get us the calculation of the dividend and interest income? We don't need to go through it now, but it's a substantial increase year over year. So I'd love to see how that, where we are actual this year, and then the calculation for how we got to fiscal year 2020,
Yep.
the actual calc.
Right.
Thanks. What else on revenue? Anything? Finance?
No.
It's all, we're basically talking the stuff that comes from the state as well as.
State, we got some rentals, we
interest.
sell leases
Yeah.
and the.
Okay. Anything else? Seeing none, we'll go to the Finance Department budget, which is page 142.
Here's right
So
here.
we are largely flat year over year.
Yeah, the one thing that's different is, as you guys remember, that fees and professional services, when which was added to my budget at $66,000 a few years ago, and we've never spent the whole amount. The three things that we wanted to primarily do with that money was develop and execute a grant policy and procedures to get that off of the auditor's comment sheet, management letter, and so we've done that. One, to improve our cash flow projections. We've done that. You've seen some of the results of that in the interest income. And we also wanted to acquire transparency budget software, something that we would put online that with pie charts and pictures and stuff that could be seen and used and maybe even be interactive with, and manipulated by residents. We haven't done that. So that, we reduced that 65,000 request, the budget down to 39. There's four numbers in there. One is, if you remember, there's a person whose retirement plan was agreed to by one of the prior, was it Audley? Jackie Durrell, that payment would come out of that line item on that budget. That's $7,000. There's the second item with respect to We have the grant management policy and program in place. We're still implementing fully the cash flow. But that takes management and time, and so right now we have a $15 an hour part-time person doing that kind of work. So, and that's in there at $20,000, and that should probably be if it was properly a line item, it would be in the part-time payroll instead of there. And then there's $750 for the CAFR filing, and then the current budget director is planning retirement June 30th, 2020.
Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so.
35 years, man.
Wow.
It will be 35.
So I have.
You started when you were 4.
I was 4. Thank you, Tom. That's.
You're welcome.
So I put $12,000 in there for a month overlap in the hire, because there's a lot of information to be transferred from one to the other there. So that's what makes
You
up
say
the
1 month?
1 month. The salaries, benefits.
35 years reduced to 1 month.
I was doing the math in my head.
Sounds like Linda's got an $80,000 consulting job for the next 20 years.
It's a little more than a year a day if you work every day during the month, so I think that's doable. Yeah.
That's okay. If Bob leaves, we're given 2 weeks.
That's pretty close to right on. So that's basically the budget.
Couple of things, I guess. You mentioned at the CAFR that there was, I think Caitlin mentioned it, that there was one position that was vacant. Has that position been filled?
There's.
Yeah, Caitlin mentioned that somebody had quit because it was basically, she kind of intimated that it was because they went to a job where they can get a pension full-time and not a 401B.
Well,
or A, whatever.
Jennifer, that's actually kind of a little bit related to the tax collector as well. When you saw the elimination of the $2,600 in seasonal, and with the addition of $3,500 in overtime pay, so a net cost of the town of $1,000. Jennifer, whose last name I'm drawing a blank, Jennifer Cole, actually was the person who worked in the tax office when that position was eliminated, and she came over to the accounts payable office because we had an open position there at that time. We still supported her and so we used to loan her to the tax department because she had the tax experience on the the July 1 and January 1 time periods. So she left. She got a job as an assistant tax collector in another town with pension and all this other. And that position is still open. We're recruiting for it right now.
And you're planning on filling that? You're not going to just keep it open? So is that the accounting clerk, or what?
That's the accounting clerk.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
And then to finish the tax collector portion, that so we don't have that person to loan them anymore.
Right, which is why they need.
Right.
Why is the printing and binding gone down by?
We're not going to supply budget books next year.
What? Well, you don't have to supply them to the RTM. I'll approve that.
I don't know. Linda can.
That's the quote I received to
great.
print your 5-page budget publication in the newspaper. At least that's what they quoted me for this year.
Great. Good job.
Okay.
Another newspaper.
Let's move on. We'll go to page 162. That's us.
Can I just say one thing? I forgot to say this at the CAFR, Bob, but I think you and Caitlin and the rest of the finance team did a great job in getting all of those recommendations removed that Joe used to report on. So, I mean, we did get something out of that. It was a clean, and I meant to say that night after they came off, but good job in finally clearing that up, and no more recommendations this year.
Thank you.
The monthly report was really good this
was sent out, right?
162.
No.
That doesn't have anything to do with their fee increase. I'm only kidding.
Where's the,
So, Bob,
the Board of Finance? What page is the Board of Finance on?
162. So we got small increases for the clerk.
Yeah, so the O'Connor Davies contract was a 5-year contract with 5 years of rates. What's in there is the current rate, which is a 2% increase over last year's. Last year was 99,870, and this year it's 101,945. I think that's 2%. And that's pretty much it.
Any
2%
Yeah, for
salary
the-
increase for the clerks.
clerks. Any questions, comments, concerns on this? All right. Seeing none, the Board of Finance is done. Let's go to debt service. Talk to us about the use, this $1.4 million use. Explain this to us one more time.
So, the debt service, the,
What page are we on, sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, 269. 269.
269, thank you.
let me make sure I know what you're talking
Oh.
from, so let me go.
Down
there
at the
as well.
bottom, it's the use of
The
debt
tab that
service
says debt
fund
service.
reserves,
Yeah,
$1.4
no, just,
million.
I have several debt schedules that I look at, so I just want to make sure I speak to the one you're looking at. Okay, so this is a little bit different order, what I'm going to give you here. The total principal due on the long-term bonds and the bond anticipation notes this year is rounding $19 million. The total interest due on the same is $6,500,000. Add those two together, you get $25.5 million. That is offset to get to the 230303.
No, you've got the wrong, I must have the wrong numbers.
We have
What page are we on?
60 and 5.9.
Page
No,
269.
what I'm saying is I'm giving you numbers in a different order. The total principal for both the bands.
Yeah, but then you told us, I'm sorry about to cut you off, but then you told us that the total debt expense, which we have a total debt expense on here.
Oh, you're talking about the 24,703?
Yeah, and you said it was
yeah,
25,
yeah,
so
right, that's what. Right.
So what's the right
What I meant to say, no, what I meant to say, to get to the 23,303,
Well, get me to the 24,703 first, because that's the number that's off, and then we can talk about the 23,303.
19 million for principal on bands and notes. 6.5 for interest on bands and notes. That's a total of 25.5. That 25.5 is offset by 858,000, which is the amortization of the bond debt service bond premium and the band premium debt service amounts. You know, we amortize those over a 3-year period.
Yep.
That brings you down to the 24,703,000.
Okay.
Then that 24,703 is reduced further by $1 million. That is the remaining portion of the transfers of fund balance that were placed there by this board in the last couple of years. We used some of it last year, and we're using the rest of it this year. So that's $1 million. And then our accrued salary reserves, which is the reserve that we build up for the June 30th.
This is the offset from contingency to here.
Right, that we had reserve balance left, we put that in here.
Got it.
And that brings us down, that's the 400,000, and that brings us down to the 23.
And all these numbers tie to the debt schedules, and you've got everything tied down. And this doesn't assume any repricing, because that opportunity is kind of...
Okay, right. Yeah, we
On.
tie these to both Phoenix's, Matt Sprendel's numbers, and bond council's numbers, and with Caitlin's numbers. So we got like a triple check, so to speak, or a double check off of our numbers.
Do we have questions, comments, concerns on this? Deb?
Thank you. So that's roughly, what, 7.5% debt service?
I'm sorry, what?
As a
What's the
percentage?
debt service
Debt service, I'm
percentage?
saying, is about 7.5%. I'm just doing
Yeah.
that in my head. So, well,
Yeah,
that's a,
6.5, 7, yeah. $300 million budget.
right, so we have a pretty strong balance sheet. I mean, that's a good number in that we're approving what comes before us, and we're under that 10% threshold.
Yeah, and it's getting better. I mean, based upon the capital plan, and let's face it, there's going to be stuff added to the capital plan that we have no idea what's there. But based upon all the work that we've done and what I can anticipate coming down, I think our debt service percentage over time is probably going to decrease.
Well, the only big thing we've got a few things, but the one big thing we have is the whole One Rod Highway and how that gets financed and all that. And that's going to significantly impact this number, because that's like a...
That's a $40 million thing, yes.
We got to decide how that's going to be funded.
Decide how that's going to be funded.
Right. So that's still out there.
Okay.
And that's all in one shot.
It's still a good number. I mean, I'm happy
Yeah,
to
I
see
mean,
that.
there's
You're
basic,
right,
yeah,
John.
no, it's a good number. It'll continue to be a good number, and
Well, we've got a few things, right? We've got, John, to your point, school reimbursement issues from the state, which they've already targeted. We've got that large project for WPCA, which we know is on the horizon. We've been told that for a number of years. And then we also are going to have, you can expect, rising interest costs, because that's what's going on in the marketplace. So all of that, although we've done a good job. Right.
We have to bond. Mill Hill's coming back.
yeah, the rising interest
Everything.
costs haven't
Yeah.
quite come to fruition. I mean,
They're coming up.
we actually have a positive mark-to-market on our
Which
town
is amazing.
portfolio, which,
Yeah.
kind of, I could like to say I'm proud of it, but it's
Yeah.
it's a matter of happenstance and part.
Understand. Go ahead, Ms. Nesbitt. I'm sorry to cut you
No,
off.
I just want to make sure I understood the conversation here. John, when you said the school reimbursement, you're talking about?
Yeah, because the governor's proposed a debt diet, and there's going to be a real question with respect to what, if any, reimbursement municipalities like Fairfield may get on school projects.
Right, and that's not
still
bonded,
up
though.
there.
No, they do get bonded. The issue's going to be what's in the waterfall and what was the reimbursement expected in the waterfall. And to
But
the
by-
extent that that reimbursement is overstated, we've got to bond that money.
But my understanding, though, is that the current projects are grandfathered in. It's only
Agreed.
future projects.
Agreed.
Right.
No,
so-
but it's moving forward
Right.
depending on how the debt waterfall was done, right? If we have a $25 million project out there and we expected to get $5 million back, and we're on the debt diet and we get $2 million back, all of a sudden our cost just went up by $3 million that we have to bond in order to do the project.
Like the Mill Hill project.
Mill Hill is not, it's not in the hopper really yet.
No,
Not going to
it's
count.
not.
Yeah.
No, that's at risk, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's at risk in terms of reimbursement percentage. That's absolutely correct.
A lot of risk there.
Yeah.
A lot of ways.
Okay, then.
Other solutions.
Danger.
Anybody else? Anything else on debt? Seeing none, we've reached the end of our agenda for this evening. It was a decently long evening, but we chopped a lot of wood. So, questions, comments, concerns?
Just one comment. I mean, it's only 11 o'clock. I mean,
So
I think that's a success.
it is almost exactly 1 hour less than we did it last year.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank God the fund balance thing got moved.
Yeah.
We might have been here till 1.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, hold on. Yeah, that might not be a fair comparison.
I had about 25 pages of questions, so that would have gone on for a while.
I don't think fund balance last year was that big a deal.
No, but this year, well, I mean, tried to get a little fancy.
All right, anybody, anything?
Fuzzy
Seeing
math.
none, do I have a motion? I'll take a motion to adjourn from Mr. DeWitt and a second by Mrs. Leclerc. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're done for the